everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, September 26th, and I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with some incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we're going to head over to Alan, where he's going to speak with Hugo Castellanos, podcast host and speaker of the Latinos Who Tech podcast, where they will talk about Hugo's upcoming DevOps World 2022 workshop, Latinos in Tech, unconventional resources to effectively recruit diverse talent into DevOps and security roles. Alan will then meet with Andrew Lau, CEO and co-founder of Jellyfish, where they will discuss how engineering leaders can use data to know that their teams are focused on the highest priority work. We will then air episode 14 of The Open Mainframe. In today's episodes, hosts Alan and John will speak with key industry and open mainframe project leaders who are stepping up to join the mainframe modernization effort, including Misty Decker from Micro Focus, Len Santalucia from Vicom Infinity, and Peter McCaffrey. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on to tell us more about some of the upcoming webinars. Next up, we are airing episode 1 of our series, Engineering the Change. This series will follow 3 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship Program as they tackle a 10-week intensive coding bootcamp and prepare themselves for careers in software engineering. We then have 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first, Mike will interview David Williams, Senior Vice President for Market Strategy at Quali, as David explains what impact the economic downturn is having on DevOps teams. Mike will then interview Paul Truelove, CEO of SecureAuth, where Paul discusses the path towards eliminating the need for passwords to access IT infrastructure. Then we go to Yalla DevOps, where Alan sat down with Fred Simon, co-founder and chief data scientist of JFrog, and Baruch Sedogursky, director of developer relations and DevOps advocate at JFrog, to discuss DevOps and IoT. And to wrap up the broadcast, also at Yalla DevOps, Alan spoke with Liran Hamovich, co-founder and CTO of Rookout, about the shift left movement and refining DevOps. That's what we have coming for you on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy. Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for September 26th. First up, Facebook users are suing Meta by accusing them of tracking on iOS through a loophole in Apple's privacy update. According to the lawsuit, Meta avoided Apple's new restrictions through Facebook's in-app browser, which opens links through the app itself. These claims are based on a recent report that raised concerns over Facebook and Instagram's in-app browsers for tracking data. Apple released its major privacy update in April of last year, and it struck a blow to social media companies that would track their user behavior for advertising purposes. In regards to this lawsuit, though, Meta has stated that the allegations were without merit and that it would defend itself against it. Next, Tesla announced a recall for over 1 million of its cars, the primary reason being problems with its automatic windows. According to regulators, the windows may not react accordingly after detecting an obstruction. This being said, Tesla says it will fix this problem with a software update, not a physical recall itself. The recall covers all 4 of its car models, and Tesla has stated that it is not aware of any injuries or crashes related to the recall. While we are on the subject of cars, the rental car company Hertz has announced that it plans to order 175,000 EVs from General Motors over the next 5 years. This GM order is the latest deal Hertz has made in order to boost its EV lineup. In the past, Hertz has signed deals with other EV makers, and it plans to have 25% of its fleet be electric by the end of 2024. In the past, automakers haven't shown off deals with rental car companies since they sell these cars at a discount, but the fanfare of this deal could be a good sign for the electric vehicles industry. In other news, France has called for a massive acceleration of renewable energy development. The plan would include offshore wind farms and solar power, and a move to make France's energy policies more similar to that of its European neighbors. With the war in Ukraine, the supply of Russia's cheap natural gas has been limited, and it has stoked fears of electricity shortages for France and other European countries. France's new strategy will be a long-term response to this energy crisis, where it hopes to increase its renewable energy sources to levels similar in surrounding European countries. Zooming out, France is currently 17th in the EU for renewable energy sources. Next up, the live streaming service Twitch has announced that they will ban gambling content. This announcement comes as several Twitch streamers threatened to boycott the platform after one streamer reportedly misled people into giving him $200,000 to gamble with. Twitch hopes that with this new ban, which will go into place on October 18th, will help provide consumer protection and shield its community from potential harms. On Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at a survey of IT security leaders on cyber attacks. Keeper Security's survey found several troubling results, including how many of the respondents do not report attacks and that many do not invest in the cybersecurity tools needed to protect their organizations. To learn more about these findings and its implications, go to securityboulevard.com. On DevOps.com, we have an article where Mitch Ashley, CTO of Techstrong Group, reflects on several of his most significant influences on his journey in DevOps. He takes a look at several of the conferences, books, and tools that have shaped his path. To read his retrospective, go to DevOps.com. Finally, on Container Journal, we have an article looking at Docker's plan to embed the ability to dynamically generate a software bill of materials, or SBOM, using the Docker build command. Docker says that when it comes to building cloud-native applications, the current SBOM tools can't keep up with the pace of developers. Docker wants to address this problem by providing more visibility into the components that are used to construct applications. To learn more about Docker's plan to integrate a free SBOM tool, go to Container Journal. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. You know, our next interviewee and this next segment is really in anticipation of DevOps World, which is happening this week up in Orlando at the World Marriott. You know, we're going to be up there, meaning Techstrong TV. We're going to be streaming live during the event. So if you log into Techstrong TV, you'll see us up there live. We might even have this gentleman live after his presentation there. But for today, we're trying to, and we've been doing this now for a couple of weeks, both here on Techstrong TV and in DevOps World. We're trying to give you a flavor of what to expect at this year's DevOps World. You know, for many of you, you may not be familiar with DevOps World. But I'll tell you, is where I sit, as the founder of DevOps.com, is DevOps World and its predecessor Jenkins World was always a major stakeholder, flag holder in the year, for DevOps enthusiasts. In years past, it's been in California a lot. I think the most recent one before COVID, Physical DevOps World, was over at the Moscone Center. And that was an amazing event. I remember it almost like it was yesterday. This year, we're on the East Coast over in Orlando. There's still time actually to register. If you are planning to be in the Orlando area or are near, maybe Atlanta, down here in South Florida, Tampa Bay area, anywhere. You know, Orlando has a great new airport. They just opened a beautiful new terminal. And there's still time. come on down to DevOps World. You can get details. I'm sure there's probably discounts. I think DW22 is a discount code you can use. If you go over to DevOpsWorld.com, check it out. Right now, though, I want to introduce you to this gentleman. His name is Ugo Castellano, and I mispronounced it. He's going to do it much better than me. Ugo, give us your name.
Hi, Alan. Thank you for having me. My name is Hugo Castellanos. You can call me Hugo. That's fine. I know we speak many languages here in the tech world. We speak JavaScript and Python and Spanish, English, French, what have you. Just happy, thrilled to be here and looking forward to DevOps World.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ugo. So, Ugo, before we jump into DevOps World and your involvement in it, let's hear a little bit about who you are and what you got going on.
Yeah, so I'm a musician turned hardware engineer turned podcaster. I started my career in music in Central Florida, producing bands and working in recording studios. Had some really good mentoring. A mentor, boss of mine, pushed me to get my EE degree. And I got my dream at the time of getting a job in Silicon Valley. So working hardware engineering for almost 10 years, places like, semiconductor industry. And after doing that for quite a bit, when 2020 happened, I decided that I want to live my life on my own terms. So I decided to embrace podcasting as a career. And that's what I've been doing since. And I relocated to my hometown of Orlando, Florida. And I'm having a blast. So right now I'm running Latinos Who Tech. It's a podcast about the Latinos that work in the tech industry. They work at places like Google, Facebook, CloudBees. I've had CloudBees people there before. And it's all about how can we bring more talent into the industry from unconventional sources. I'm a strong believer that you cannot be what you cannot see. So the goal of Latinos Who Tech is to bridge that gap, be that beacon that shows people how can you bridge your career into tech.
I love it. I love that, man. You don't know this, but down here in South Florida, we're based in Boca Raton, and we work with a tech camp or tech school called Boca Code. And these are people, he has a variety of courses that they teach there, but we offer something called Engineering the Change Scholarship, where we pick a underrepresented community member, and we sponsor their they have this intense 12-week cohort on becoming a software developer, and it's about a $10,000 or $12,000 course, and we pick one winner each, one fall and one spring semester winner, and we just actually going to announce this fall's winner in the next week. But I know from where you're coming from with that, and I love that. I love the cause, and it's so good that you went out to Silicon Valley, you did your thing, and now you brought it home, and you're doing it for the community. Of course, Orlando has a vibrant Hispanic, Latino community. Many folks from, I know, Puerto Rico have migrated to the Orlando area over the last, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe more. Definitely. Yep. And that's great. I mean, look, same thing down here in South Florida, right? We have huge, that's where we live. So I love what you're doing. I think it's so dead on. We'll talk more about that even off camera. I want to talk to you.
Of course.
But let's talk DevOps World now, if you can, a little bit. So how did you first become aware of DevOps World, CloudBees? Let's start there.
So 2021, I had an informational interview with Marcos Grimaldo. He's part of the CloudBees team, and he mentioned the conference. And at the time, 2021, we were just coming out of the pandemic, right? Like we're still in the middle of all the challenges going on logistically worldwide. So conferences were not really in my mind at the time. I was more concerned about, okay, I just moved back to Florida, just bought a house. I'm learning to work remote, how a lot of us, went through that transition. And then in late 2021, early 2022, I started going back to conferences in person to talk about what I've learned. My main skill is technical marketing. So talking about public speaking, talking about how to do elevator pitches for students, for college students. And then I started going back to technical conferences in my space. So things like Podcast Movement. And then CloudBees popped up. And I'm local, I'm in Orlando. So I have to go to DevOps World. So it's one of those things that it was a perfect alignment, right place, right time. And I look forward to going and adding some value to the conference.
Absolutely. And it's great. It's great that we, look, Orlando's a huge conference area to begin with, right? We have all the hotels and conference facilities and everything. And I think it was so great that CloudBees, decided to do this show in Orlando, because as I mentioned earlier, the Heritage there was doing it on the West Coast. And I think before COVID came, they were actually planning one in Las Vegas, which, look, I don't have anything against Vegas either, but for me personally, it's a lot easier going to Orlando than flying home from Vegas.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's about the community. It's about finding a place to get us together. It's funny, I just got back from a podcasting conference in Dallas, and people are in the group chats sharing all the info about, hey, tourism in Dallas. And listen, man, I'm not here for tourism. I'm here to connect with others. I'm here to stay in the conference rooms. I'm here to network. I'm here to add value. So there might be a little bit of that. Like if you last day of the conference, you skip out early and you go to one of the attraction parks, that's fine. Do your thing. But I think it's important to be engaged, especially if your company sending you and on all that. Also, a big part is the global aspect of it. It's no secret that remote work is it's what's happening right now, and a lot of people relocated from Silicon Valley to different parts of the country, to Texas and the South and the Midwest.
Or different parts of the world.
Yeah. So, and case in point, when I look at my podcast, because I run Latinos Who Tech, and I also run a Spanish podcast called Conexiones podcast. My audience is US, Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Spain, all over the world. I have people in New Zealand that listen to my content and to my Spanish
One
content.
of the great things about the internet, man.
Yeah, it's worldwide and it's evergreen, because those tips where I taught somebody the tricks on, how to get referrals in tech jobs, those are good in 2018, 2019, 2021, 2030. So the fact that content is there forever, it's what keeps me going.
Absolutely. And, it's also important to remember, Ugo, that we're one world. But we don't, though the earth spins at one speed round and round, when it comes to things like DevOps and other areas of technologies, some areas are more accelerated than others, right? And we see that. We see that here at DevOps.com and Techstrong TV on our, geo kind of analytics. I mean, certainly DevOps is mainstream in the US. DevOps is very mainstream in EMEA, Europe. I've done DevOps events and DevSecOps events in China and Singapore. And we put on the DevOps India Summit every year. I mean, India is a very technically advanced country. But you know what? There are places in Africa, and there are places in Latin America, South America, where DevOps is just happening now, right? It's just starting to happen. It's starting to bloom. It's starting to really take root, right? Maybe they're 18 months, 3 years behind where, let's say, Silicon Valley is, or something like that, or London. And it's important. It's important that there are people like you out there talking tech with them in the language, the language they speak. I don't think we should underestimate how important that global audience is, and how, we could help accelerate their adoption and their success with this stuff. Let's zero in specifically on DevOps World, though, next week. What are some of the things you're going to be doing?
So I'm going to be hosting a workshop on sourcing talent and sourcing global talent. I find that there's been a number of communities that have sprung, grassroots communities of tech people globally, in not only across the US, but also all of Latin America and Europe. And I think that those are great sources, potential sources of talent. But again, you can have the best talent, but if people don't know about it, then what's it good for? So I'm going to be talking about unconventional talent and how to tap into it for DevOps and security roles. There's a big task of education about what does it mean to work in DevOps. If you ask my niece, hey, what does Uncle Hugo do for work? Oh, he stares at a computer for 8 hours a day. There's and that's
well,
cute.
Because you're in the computer world.
Right. But again, when you go to that second level of, okay, are you doing, are you running DevOps? Are you running testing? What are you doing? So
Amen.
So there's a big task of education. So I'm going to be talking about how to tap into those communities for recruiting purposes. Again, when you talk about people that want to work remote and they will not apply to your company unless you give them the option to work 100% remote, great. I know off the top of my head, I know 6 communities that are only of people like that, like tech people that have the tech skills, people that are willing, people that speak the language, people that doesn't matter if they live in Uruguay or Mexico or Portugal, but completely proficient in English. So I'm going to be teaching about how to tap into them, and also, some of the unconventional ways of tapping into talent. I find that we have this concept of scripts, these negative scripts that we have, that we internalize, that, oh, if they didn't go to a Stanford or an MIT, are they really good? And yeah, that's not true. Talent comes from anywhere, but you need to give them a chance.
Absolutely.
You need to give them a chance. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be doing a workshop on that on Thursday, 29th of September. I look so much forward to it. It's my first time at DevOps World, and one of many more to come.
That sounds fantastic. And what a great idea for a workshop too, right? There's such a talent shortage, right? That's all we hear about. How many jobs are open in cybersecurity? How many more developers we need? And you know what? There's only so many kids who go to Stanford or MIT or any of these, fancy, well-known kind of programs like that. The bulk of the people for these jobs, a lot of them are self-taught. A lot of them they don't go to a university. They may go to something like the Boca Code School I was talking to you about, right here in Boca Raton, and they're taking an intense boot camp. But you know what I find is a better measure for success, Hugo? Passion. If people are passionate about that, they have a burning fire in their belly about wanting to be a cybersecurity person, or become an AppSec person, or a software developer, or a QA, or whatever. That goes a long way towards success, and that's what companies want to harness, right? They want people who are passionate, who take pride in what they do. And that's a great indicator of success. I'm going to be up there, but I'm not going to be able to sit in on your workshop, unfortunately. I'll be doing interviews all that day, but I want you to stop by the booth, stop by our interview.
Oh, certainly.
Broadcast center there, and we'll talk about how the workshop went.
It sounds fantastic. Let me ask you, I know you said it, but I'm going to ask you to repeat it. For people who want to clue in or tune in to your podcast, what's their names and where do they listen to them?
So look for Latinos Who Tech in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Cast, wherever you get your podcast. And also latinoswhotech.com is where they have access to all the good stuff, show notes, tools, interview guides, all that good stuff. And only for the show, Alan, I'm actually launching the 4th season of Latinos Who Tech to match Hispanic Heritage Month in 2022. So I'm going to be putting new episodes starting the first week of October. So excited for this, and thank you for having me.
I'm excited. I'm excited for you, man. That's fantastic, Hugo. Keep up the great work. I look forward to seeing you later this week up in Orlando, man.
Likewise, Alan. Thank you so much.
All right. Keep up the great work.
Thanks.
Latinos Who Code. Is that it?
Latinos Who Tech.
Who Tech. Excuse me.
It's not only code. It's not only code. There's DevOps.
There's more to tech than coding. That's
Yeah,
right.
there's the dark side of tech marketing too. There's the dark side of sales
some
as
of
well.
my friends, some of my best friends are in tech marketing. But hey, it's all good.
Including me. We'll see you this week at DevOps World. Hope to see you this week at DevOps World as well. It's in Orlando, Marriott World Center. Go to DevOpsWorld.com for more information. For now, though, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I am happy to have all the way from Boston, where he tells me the fishing's been good this summer, Andrew Lau. Andrew is the co-founder CEO of Jellyfish. Hey, Andrew, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Alan, so great to be here. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to coming down that way and fishing together because I feel like
You know what? Wait till it gets good and cold up there.
That's right. I'll wait till February and then we'll make the trip.
I'm going to hold you to that, man. Hey, Andrew, I've known about Jellyfish a while, but not everyone maybe has. Why don't we start here? Why don't we give people a little Jellyfish background? And you're the co-founder, CEO. How did you come to do this?
Oh, man. Okay. Thank you for giving us a chance to talk about it because I'm more than excited to. Maybe I'll give you the top line picture and then let's go into a little bit of how we got here, right? So Jellyfish is, I'll be very simplistic about it, but we're trying to do for engineering what Salesforce did for sales. And what do I mean by that, right? I don't mean we're looking at sales pipelines or calls or any of those things. But when I started my career 20-something years ago, there was no data in sales. And that meant that sales and business weren't working together. They were like doing a lot of gut feel, a lot of hopes and wishes, but they weren't like tied in. And I think if you talk to the kids today, they know every sales metric possible. When I look at engineering right now, it is probably the single most expensive and really the most strategic function for most companies today. Every company is a software company. Software has eaten the world, right? It is what's going to save, all these different companies out there and potentially save the world. Now, the challenge is it's the only department now that the business doesn't understand. And so often the business side and engineering are not working in stride. Like we're underfunding products that need to be refactored. We're not driving hard and enabling the teams to be most functional and helpful in what they need to do. We're not really leading our companies forward with software innovation because we're not giving enough attention to it. And so for us, the goal here is to provide that connection between business and engineering, create that executive leadership, visibility, and understanding engineering, and making sure that the engineering team understands how they fit in with business, right? So that's the Jellyfish story. The year is in 2022. We're trying to do this in contemporary data-centric manners. We tie it in the tools the team's already using, so no one has to change anything they're already doing. Now, to your question, how did I get here? If you bear with a little bit longer story, I was trained an engineer. My co-founders, Dave and Phil, actually hired me in 1999. I know that's forever long ago as a different company.
Not for me. Okay.
Yeah. For a lot of the folks listening is probably watching here, it is a long time ago, different generation. But I joined them as the first engineer of a team, and I got to see a company go from 8 people to 550, right? And that was a tremendous experience for me to see that grow. And the cherry on top is we sold it for over $1 billion, right? So that taught me a lot. But it also taught me about relationships and teams and trust and why these things matter. We got the crew back together in 2016 to say, hey, we really respected working with each other 20 years ago. Can we consider doing it again here today? But we don't want to do this naivety. We want to make a dent in the world. And for us, we came up through the engineering ranks, through the management ranks, through the product ranks. And we frankly said the job is hard. When I was running a large team of 70 people, I think the job was beyond hard because you're trying to make sure the team is supported, executing at their fullest, and the business doesn't understand what they're doing. We're trying to fund the team. We're trying to actually invest in the product. We're trying to make the business succeed. And boy, is that hard because you're holding all the sides together by hand. And so for us, we come here with empathy. We come here with empathy because scaled engineering, leadership, and management and engineering is just plain hard because of the disconnect from business. And we want to fix that. And if today every company is a software company, well, then sky's the limit for the potential here.
Absolutely. You know, Andrew, I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm thinking back to my own. I actually, in 1999, we went public in early 2000. Based in Cambridge, then we were based down in Purchase. Early ASP, which was like cloud before there was cloud, and there was no virtualization. There wasn't great bandwidth, but I've been there, done that. But you know what? I also saw Salesforce come on the scene when they did. And here's the dirty little secret. I don't know how secret it is.
Yeah.
A lot of salespeople hated Salesforce.
Yeah.
Right? They hated the idea of having to put everything into a system where everyone could see what they were up to and what their progress was and how they were marrying efforts to business objectives, right? And metrics and you know, it shone lights into dark corners that hadn't seen light ever before. I got to imagine, as data-driven as engineers are, I think they're much more data-driven than salespeople.
Sure.
I got to imagine there's probably a little reluctance.
Yeah. I think it goes to like so thank you for bringing that up, Alan. Like we're students of the journey as well, because if I'm going to make the analogy, I better go back in time and ask what happened back then. I would say that there was reluctance. It was more about like doing the work of typing things in.
Yeah.
When I type things in, well, the good part in 2022 is you don't have to type things in anymore, right? It's automatic. So that's one change. But to your point, that doesn't solve it entirely. But I think if you look back at the journey of Salesforce, what they showed up in 2004, in 2010, what company isn't running a CRM? So that was the revelation. It took 6 years to kind of get to that point. But if you look at the macro stats, we as an industry now push more money into sales, right? Like, because we now actually understand like, hey, how this team is actually like really making the business hum. And not only that, we as an industry are not throwing silly money in there. We're putting strategic money. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that, look, if for some reason these leads are, we're not enough leads, well, then let's not blindly fund salespeople. Let's get the BDRs moving, right? Or if it turns out that like, hey, we're actually having some certain parts of some segments, let's move those reps to a different segment, right? And so what actually ends up happening is that it makes the team more successful. Now, when I look at this from the engineering perspective, you're right, there probably is some hesitance in that stuff, but I think it actually goes to why and how you use the tools we are using, right? We come from first and foremost that I think actually companies are making dumb decisions, frankly. We are starving investments that need to happen, refactor projects that really should be happening. We're spending way too much on bugs. I'm working on weekends fixing old line software from 20 years ago that I didn't make that needs to be rebuilt. And the company is thinking like they're not realizing we're spending 80% of our time on that old product that actually makes no profit. Boy, that's a dumb decision, right? And on top of it, we have team members right now that are, not getting their stuff done, not because of them, but because someone's not reviewing their PRs, product's not actually helping them make the right decisions on this stuff. And so I actually look at this, go back to like the why. And the why is to actually really, I said we're talking about engineering, but more than half the time, it's actually about getting the business to understand there's a reality of how software works. There's a reality of how maintenance works. There's a reality of investments that we have to make and not smear ourselves like peanut butter. So I actually think the behavior change that I think we're trying to drive here is as much with the actual business to make logical decisions and investments than it is actually just about investments in engineering, right? So those are like, it goes back to the why. And the last part is to make sure that we're not leaving any engineers left behind. Like we have one company and a team where they've got a tremendously distributed team, and they're realizing that there are some introverted, more quiet team members that just aren't getting their PRs reviewed. And boy, that means they're not getting their stuff out there, and that's unfair, right? And so like you have to go back to the why, and the why really here is making the team succeed and making sure the business understands and invests accordingly. I think those are the most important things. And I think if you explain the why, I think people actually like are on board, because who wants to be part of a company that doesn't succeed? I want to be a company that succeeds. I want my code and my project to create the next, 20 million ARR because of the things I did. That's what I want as an engineer. And so like, really, you got to connect those dots. And I think you really have to go back to the why here, because we're all trying to build a successful company that actually leads through the market,
I agree with you, man. You said it beautifully, Andrew. let's continue with the Salesforce analogy for a minute, if you don't mind. Initially, like when I first became aware of Salesforce, look, there were a lot of big companies using things like Siemens or Siebel, excuse me.
Siebel. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about Salesforce, well, that was SaaS-based versus having to run it yourself, and that was a huge advantage. But what really ignited Salesforce is when it became a platform.
Sure.
Where it wasn't just what the Salesforce software itself did, but what this whole ecosystem
Yep.
of ISVs and stuff out there who were enhancing, building on, that platform. You see a similar kind of path for Jellyfish, you think?
I love that you're calling me out on this analogy, right? Because not all analogies are perfect, but I think it helps us clarify here just to walk through this. I think you described, like, I cheated. I gave a cheap analogy here that I think is a good one, but not perfect. Siebel did come first, right? Siebel did blaze the trail for CRM.
Yep.
And did kind of open the door, and Salesforce kind of made it accessible, right? And made it for everyone, right? And I think to a certain degree, we have a little bit harder journey, right? Because, like, look, it's we're not just adding phone calls up here, right? We actually have to figure out, like, what people are actually working on and how to make them succeed here. And so I in some ways, we're earlier in the journey in that part of it, right? So I completely agree with you that, yes, the real leverage will be longer term, which is where we have the platform where lots of ISVs can work with us to enable, these engineering teams to be even more successful. But we actually have to walk the journey fully first, right? We have to actually, like, right now, engineering is the only department that probably doesn't have clear slides for the board meeting. They probably don't have KPIs the business actually understands. And we as an industry actually have to solve that, right? It is too strategic of a function to just be like hopes and wishes, right? And I think we really need to actually figure out what those are. And the journey for us and this industry is actually help figure out, like, how do we understand that this team is actually driving the business goals on these things? What are the handful of KPIs we need to? And that's the journey we're on, to work with our customers, our leaders, to help figure out what works for them in their way. And yes, if we get there, then we get to talk about that. Now, let me add one more thing that I think is worth calling out here. I think, we can joke and talk about Salesforce today because it is so darn ubiquitous. It is everything to everybody. So maybe it was an easy analogy to make, right? But part of that journey helped figure out not just what it was, but who interacts with it. And I actually think today, like, we're also on that journey, right? Where you think about, you've got a team of 100, 200 engineers. It is about the code, but it's also about the product management process. It is also how it fits in with finance. It is also around how the forecasting actually happens around next year's 2023 budgets. It's also about, is the code making it through the DevOps pipeline cleanly, right? And who's actually not left behind along the way. And each of those use cases leads to different constituencies, a different user, a different need, right? And it also leads to different systems and different ISVs that are actually at the core of actually where we might be able to synergize different data together to actually help that function move, right? And so the way we think about it isn't, a blanket for platform's sake. We think deeply around which use cases, which persona, who are we helping, what data is really going to help them get that business objective and an engineering objective together, right? And how do we bring it together so that people don't have to type in things manually? Because look, it's we're too new here to actually have a bunch of folks running around filling out spreadsheets by hand again, right? We have to do something better than that, right? So, and the way we do that is actually partner with these ISVs to actually bring these things together in context to help them understand what's going on.
Yep. Hey, Andrew, I'm going to go off script here a little bit, or off the reservation if I apologize. But, I think one of the things also that Jellyfish can help with is we're going through an interesting time in terms of how engineering is organized in enterprises.
Yep.
Right? Is it the CTO? Is it the CPO? Is it the chief data officer? We have one of our properties within the Techstrong universe is digital CXO. We made it X for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It seems from organization to organization, the person who's owning engineering right, at the C level,
Yeah.
differs.
Yeah.
It differs from organization to organization.
It's true.
How does, Jellyfish obviously can work with any of them, but what do you see with that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and look, if I had the magic answer here, we should be writing some big articles together perfectly in this stuff. But maybe we will.
Okay.
But I think it is it's an evolution, right? So I'll say a couple things. So companies that are software companies right now, like where software is their product, are really going through this kind of this revolution right now around, on the team level, they're going through this shift. When I started out, it was all, QA, program managers, and engineers was kind of like the triumvirate. We've shifted now as an industry, and now it's much more around product design and engineering, this EPD kind of thing that's actually happening on the team level. As you pointed out, actually, when you get to the kind of C level, yes, there's kind of a CTO, CPO, and I think the industry is kind of figuring out which one actually makes sense there. But actually, what's really saying is the recognition that this is not just a sideshow function. Right. So 20 years ago, look, you might join a company and they'd have a handful of software engineers, a handful. And they got hundreds of people on the business side and a couple engineers. And they really had a hard time distinguishing being like, is this repairing laptops, or is this doing this thing here? Right. This website, this is the kind of sideshow thing. Well, if you look at a company today, sometimes 40% of budget now goes to engineering because it is the thing that we sell now. It is the thing that helps the company succeed. And so inevitably, if it's the thing that represents what we sell as a business, you need to have someone represent that piece of it, right? And that's why you're seeing that kind of elevation of the C statement accordingly in that. Now, the part I think will be interesting for you and I to watch together is actually what happens in the kind of global 2000 segments and those things, right? Because you've got the CIO function, you've got product, they're going through the same EPD kind of changes going on over there too. But I actually think that the constructs in the enterprise are slightly different, right? The CIO right now has all of these things going into him or her, right? And that's a lot on their weight. And they're still worried about the data centers and the infrastructure and laptops too. That's a lot.
They're keeping the wheels on the bus.
Right. And so I think the question that we should all watch together is, does that structure remain in those organizations, or do they actually break out into more kind of BU-centric model? Where on a BU-centric model, I've seen some organizations where the GMs are starting to act more like a CPO, right? In a software company. And so there's no C in GM, right? But but they're behaviorally shifting. So I think you're calling out a thing that I think about, and I think you're right on, which is we are at a point where these roles transition, and it's not arbitrarily. It's because the nature of business is changing.
Yeah.
Right? When you and I live in a world where we're not just order takers of somebody else's thing, but we're actually driving innovation, we're making the thing that will make the business succeed. Well, suddenly, that's going to cause all kinds of reorganization of what's actually happening, and it probably will play out in a generation. I don't mean long 30 years generation. I mean, probably in a software 10 years.
5 years. 5 years are generational epics in
internet time. Anyway, hey, Andrew, we're way over time. I apologize. I monopolized you here for a bit, but it was a great discussion. You know what we didn't mention, though? URL for people who want to get more information about Jellyfish.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for reminding me, and Alan, thanks for having us here. You can find us at jellyfish.co, right? Just hit us on the web. Lots of great stuff on our website and a lot of great information that actually helps us all elevate as engineering leaders here on that. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. My handle's AMLAU. Just find me there, either place. We're more than happy to trade notes and share stories. But at the root of it, Alan, you and your community, we're here to learn from you, right? I think we are on a journey together. It's going to take us some years together as an industry to get there. But if we're there, we're in a world where engineering is leading the business. And I think you and I and the industry as a whole are going to be much better for it.
Absolutely, man. Jellyfish.co. Go check it out. Andrew Lau here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a moment.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel, CEO of Techstrong Group, and welcome to another episode of the Open Mainframe. For those who don't know, the Open Mainframe is a video program that runs monthly here on Techstrong TV, and it's produced jointly between Techstrong Group and our friends at the Open Mainframe Project, part of the Linux Foundation, and we co-produce this show every month, and we talk about topics of interest to the mainframe open source community, particular emphasis maybe on DevOps and development, application security. But we talk about a ton of topics, whether it's, COBOL and how important that language is, or education and, continuing mainframe training throughout the world. Today, we have a really interesting topic. There's a new working group being formed, and we're going to get more into that and really discuss it today. But I want to introduce you to our panel first. I'm going to do a little backwards than we normally do. I'm going to start off with my co-host, John Murdoch. John, welcome. And why don't you give the audience a little of your background?
Absolutely. My name is John Murtick. I'm director here at the Open Mainframe Project, part of the Linux Foundation. And I get to work with really some amazing people within this community, along with a lot of other industries as well. But with here, I get to work with, founding people like Misty and Peter and Len, and really just kind of help lead, set some direction, and, help to really support open source on the mainframe platform.
Great. Next up, I want to introduce you to Misty Decker. Misty's been a contributor in the past on our show, and she is going to be a catalyst for today's event. Misty, welcome. If you want to introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you so much, Alan. Catalyst, I'll take it. It's much better than instigator.
Yeah, no, catalyst is a good word.
So, yes, I'm director of product marketing at Micro Focus and a mainframe modernization evangelist. I've been in the mainframe space for over 30 years, most of that at IBM, and I'm a diehard fan. I believe that this technology is very modern, very current, but there is definitely work to be done to move organizations forward. And that's the purpose of this new working group.
Excellent. We're going to hear more about that in a second. Let me introduce the rest of our panel. Next up is Peter McCaffrey. Peter, this is your first time on the Open Mainframe show, so welcome and thanks for being on. Why don't you give out a little bit of your background to our audience?
Sure. Thanks, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Pete McCaffrey. I'm with IBM. I'm part of our mainframe software business unit. I've been different units across IBM, but have spent a lot of time with the mainframe with specific responsibility for mainframe application go-to-market. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today, Peter. And then our third panel member, through the problems of scheduling, is a little late joining, but he will be in with us. His picture's up here, though, and it's none other than Len Santalucia. Len, if he does, I'll try to do him justice. He's been on our show a number of times. Len has almost 50 years, 50 years in the mainframe world. Longtime IBMer. He recently left IBM. Well, I don't know how recently, but he's left IBM and he's now within IBM reseller. John, you probably remember the name of the company better than me. You're on mute.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Len
you got to go, Misty.
I know Len for decades now. Len Santalucia is the CTO of Vicom Infinity, a premier IBM business partner.
That's why I called you the catalyst.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Perfect.
We can hear you now, John.
Oh, sorry, I had myself on hardware mute. Now we're back.
Okay.
Okay. So, and Len will be joining in as we get going here. And in addition to that distinguished background, though, Len is also on the, isn't he on the, is it the TAC or the,
He's the chairperson of the governing board for the Open Mainframe project, and he's been that way since its inception. And I believe he's a third generation IBMer as well. So he has that distinction. Yeah. You're talking to someone who's been around IBM a long time. He'll tell you as a kid, he touched the first mainframes coming off the line, back in the 50s and 60s. So it's,
well, he's not here to defend himself just yet. So
fair enough.
But yes, good for him.
Yeah.
So, we've alluded to it, but let's hit this right on the head. Misty, a new working group was recently empowered. I think by a unanimous vote of the TAC you had mentioned, right?
Yes.
Why
I'm
don't
very
you tell
excited
us
about that.
Yep, tell us about it.
So, in my role in Micro Focus and engaging with the market around mainframe modernization and the things that organizations can do to bring their current IT stack to meet the modern needs of the business, I have met many, many different definitions of this word modernization. To somebody who's a mainframe fan, modernization means moving to DevOps, hybrid cloud, doing things in a newer way on the mainframe, using newer programming languages on the mainframe. To somebody who's in the cloud side of the house, mainframe modernization means moving off of your mainframe and getting rid of it altogether and moving to the cloud. And there's actually lots and lots of options in between there. And the word itself, because everyone assumes that they know what it means, is causing confusion in the marketplace. And the fact that each of the individual vendors are and Micro Focus included, are pushing the options that we support, right? The options that we sell. The customers are being hit on all sides by different views of modernization and isolated pieces of information. And the goal of this working group is to get the entire industry together and to create a common definition of modernization that is vendor neutral, and to create a repository of educational materials that are not about specific products, that are really about understanding that range of options, the full range of options, and helping customers understand a little bit about why would they choose one over the other? What are those considerations and things they need to take into account when deciding what to do with their own applications, development processes, and infrastructure?
Peter, I have some views on this, but I want you're the guest here. I wanted to give you the opportunity to go next, and then I'll chime in.
No, that's great. And I want to pick up on the term range. And I think that's extremely important because in my travels, I have a lot of opportunity to talk with clients. And I do run into quite a bit, particularly when you get outside of what I'll call the mainframe shop, this view that somehow modernization equals migration. And if there's this mindset that that's the only path forward, it can be very challenging because we all know there's very few one-size-fits-all approaches in our industry. And so I love the idea of really opening up the aperture to better define for businesses the range of alternatives and patterns that are available to them when they take on a mainframe application project. And I think with that range, what they'll find is A, they'll increase the likelihood of success, and B, they'll do it faster at a lower cost and less risk to their business. So I'm very supportive of really defining all of the paths and tools available to them.
So, look, none of us here are spring chickens where we just came into this industry. We've all been around. John's probably the baby. Part of me when I hear this, Misty, is I'm reminded of Microsoft circa late 1980s, early 90s, right? Where they would embrace and extend all of these kind of frameworks and standards to put their distinct, Windows ain't done till Lotus won't run, right? We grew up in those days. I abhor extremism, and I really pay no attention to the people that says, penny for penny, the mainframe is irreplaceable, and we must keep everything on the mainframe, and it must be written in COBOL. There are things that have been written in COBOL and should stay written in COBOL, and there are new things. But there are other languages. Java being one of them, but there's as many languages as there are leaves on those trees behind you. On the other hand, there are people who say, the mainframe, modernization of the mainframe, what an oxymoron, right? You can't modernize the mainframe, and we've got to move off of that. I abhor those people as well, right? I abhor both of those positions. I realize the middle's a big middle. It's kind of like politics in our country today, unfortunately. It's a big middle with a lot of, different places on it. But part of me says, Misty, are you setting yourself up for an impossible job here? I got to be honest. I'm sorry, but I'm being honest.
It's totally fair. This is definitely a huge challenge to get this full range of perspectives to agree on a common definition. But I'm encouraged because to a person, every single person that I have talked to about this on both sides and everywhere in the middle agrees with me on two main facts. And one is that modernization is not about the technology you're using. It's about meeting the goals of the business, meeting the modern needs of the business. So if we define modernization in terms of the outcomes, we'll be able to have a definition that we can all get underneath. And the second thing that they all agree on is that there are indeed cases when things should live on the mainframe. I've had cloud providers tell me there are some applications that probably should stay on the mainframe. And I have IBMers tell me there are applications that probably should move off the mainframe. And those are the two opposites. There's lots of gray space in the middle where everybody agrees and everybody supports, right? So those are the encouraging factors. The hard part is going to be agreeing on those considerations, right? So the definition, I think, is possible. The range of options is going to be super easy because everybody's going to shove all of their ideas underneath that umbrella. And then it's that next layer, the pros and cons of each option. When would you use one over the other? That's where the debates are going to be really hard. And the only thing I can think that we can do is present in this repository of educational materials both sides of the debate on those pros and cons, and just present it fairly, unbiased, and let the customers decide which they believe, right? Which makes sense to them and their situation. So yeah, it's a challenge. I think that when you look at it that way, it's very easy to get everybody on board. The biggest issue I've had so far is the first 5 minutes of any conversation. Once I can get them to thinking logically and get beyond the religion, get beyond the emotion, you'd be amazed at how much we all have in common.
And I also sort of wonder, part of this is there's a lot of scope to this. I mean, Ellen, the metaphor you use there of just, this wide in the middle, there's a lot of scope to what this means. There's tons of vendors in this space. So naturally, I could imagine you've also cordoned off some areas of like, we're not touching this. How are you thinking about these are the areas we're not doing? This is sort of our non-goals, the spaces we're staying in.
Yeah, that's interesting. What, Misty, are there sacred cows here?
There are. we are not going to let anyone put marketing materials or product specific materials into this repository. It's thought leadership, it's educational materials that we all agree on. We're going to create a framework for how things get nominated, reviewed, and approved to go into that repository, so that there is a agreement across the industry of what is considered thought leadership, fair and valid, and what is off the table because it's marketing, it's product specific. Right? There's no disparaging each other. This is exactly why the Open Mainframe Project is the perfect place to do this effort. You know, I couldn't launch this on my own because it would seem like it's coming from Micro Focus and it's going to be biased with Micro Focus's view. This has to come from an open source community with the voting, with the infrastructure that John and the Linux Foundation provide us, that give us that space where we can all collaborate together, just like any other open source project. Only this is, I don't know, open source thought leadership. I don't know if that's ever been done before, but I think that's what we're doing.
It might be newer, but it's the same idea, and it's the same thing of bringing competitors together, which Alan, you've only seen enough of projects like that, and you know how that turns out.
Right.
Well, you know, it's always interesting when you bring, you know, you said competitors together, but it's often people that just approach things from different viewpoints, different vantage points, because it's what they know. You know, my experience is, and we've done, you know, the IBM Mainframe Group has done work with AWS to define joint patterns. And as we went through that discovery process, you often heard, whoa, I didn't know you could do that. Oh, I never knew you could do that. And so, you know, I think one
on both sides, right?
Exactly, on both sides. And so I think one of the win-wins here is we're going to discover a lot of things that we didn't know we could do. And now that we do know that we can do, I think the one thing we all share in common is we want to do what's right for our clients. And when you have that mindset and you know more, then you're in a better position to do what's right for your clients. And if that's, you know, if that's, you know, taking somebody who's at Macy's and recommended they go to Gimbals for something, you know, to really date myself.
There, yeah.
But you know, you get the
Gimbals
point.
used to be a department store that competed with Macy's. But just a little background for people. But you know what? There's an interesting fact pattern here that I think is unique to the mainframe market. And it's something I didn't realize until I started DevOps.com about 8 or 9 years ago. And I was at CA World in Las Vegas, right? Computer Associates was CA at the time. Actually, excuse me, I was at an IBM Think, whatever Think was before it was called Think. And CA won Partner of the Year for their mainframe software, right? What's unique about the mainframe world is that I think I lost a ear thing. Can you still hear me? Oh, it's it. Yeah. What's unique about the mainframe industry is really the world has solidified, coalesced around the IBM mainframe, the Z infrastructure. That is the mainframe, 99% probably of market, right? And yet, IBM has been a fairly decent steward, considering they have almost, I don't want to use the M word, but they're the lone provider of hardware. But you have, CA is now, of course, Broadcom and BMC and Micro Focus and Rocket and, you know, a plethora of other software providers who have built very profitable businesses selling software on this IBM platform. Other companies, I'm not mentioning names, but other companies in tech might not have been as open, if you will. But this, you know, this sounds a little, you know, IBM and AWS, as you mentioned, Peter, great example of that as well. Misty, is that
Yeah.
the spirit you're looking to capture?
Very much so. The mainframe is unique in that the mainframe community is very, very tight knit. And I know Peter, right? I know all of these people. We know each other. I'm in a different company now. We're still friends. And we all care about the platform. And as Peter said, we care about the customer success and we care about the customer results. If you were to give an analogy of what I'm trying to accomplish here, probably the closest analogy I can find is a standard setting body, right? So this isn't like a tech standards. This is more of like a common definition. But when you have those standard setting organizations, you have different technology vendors coming together, and each of them want that standard to go a different way based on what's best for them. And you have to negotiate those balances and look at what's best for the technology. And we're going to be doing that in what's best for the market and the end customers, right? So there is going to be some level of tension, but there's also a lot of partnership just because we're mainframe communities. So we're friends already, and because it's an open source project and we have that infrastructure of negotiating between different organizations to accomplish a single goal.
Yep. I just feel necessary to interject. We've just heard that Len Santalucia unfortunately won't be able to join us. He had a customer issue pop up, so unfortunately we won't hear from him. We've spoken to Len on this issue though. And, one of the things that I thought he said in our off-camera discussion was, that really it's about doing what's right for the customer, that there is no hard and fast rules that we should always do this, right? Cobalt and Java being a great example. You don't have to port everything from Cobalt to Java, but some things should and could be ported from Cobalt to Java. Some things should remain on Cobalt for a damn good reason. At the end of the day, you all talk about being friends in the mainframe community. At the end of the day, it's your job to make the customer happy and give the customer what they need.
Right. As I was saying, it's about focusing on helping them get their IT, their entire IT stack, process, application infrastructure to a point where it can meet the modern needs of the business. I think that's where we'll end up with this definition, right? But your example of COBOL to Java is a great example, because my role as chair of this working group is to make sure that it's fair and balanced across the views. And as Micro Focus, we're not big fans of translating COBOL into Java. It's not part of our mission. I will agree that there are certain edge conditions where that's probably not a bad idea. But the vendors that sell those products would say, well, it's more like 90% of the space, and the edge conditions are when it doesn't work. I've already invited them into this working group. I am bringing the voices that my company isn't all excited about to join this working group, because I mean 100% what I'm saying, that this is the full range of options, all of them. It's an open source community, so anyone can join and contribute.
I have a point I'm going to come back to you on that, Misty, but I want to reach out to John. So John, as you sit here, right? I mean, you're the Open Mainframe Group, you're the Linux Foundation, you're ED there. What does this working group mean to you and to the Open Mainframe project?
I mean, there's a lot of ways I could think about this. One, it's sort of the outcomes we like to see. A true belief we have is when you bring diverse opinions, diverse backgrounds, diverse thought processes, groups together, you get greater outcomes. And I joked about saying the competitors early, but I mean, that's a very true fact. I mean, we want to bring those people together, and when they come together, you get amazing things that start to come from it. You get the opportunity for definitions like this, but I mean, go off into other spaces like, Kubernetes, a technology from Google, now is the cloud ubiquitous. You can go the list on Linux kernel is the poster child for that. So I think there's one aspect of it that we just look from Linux Foundation, like, this is exactly what we preach. I mean, this is exactly what we're here to provide is this. And then if I think about it from sort of a mainframe perspective, so much for years, there's been the conversation of mainframe or, and it's always been binarily thought of that. And we've been trying really hard with a lot of the technologies that have been coming through, like Zoe, to change that to a mainframe and, because, the forward-thinking enterprises of today, they have heterogeneous environments. They have all these computing infrastructures. They've got mainframes. They've got cloud. They've got distributed. They've got this whole litany of edge computing going on out here too. They have SaaS services. They've got everything. And it's not the cost of doing business. It's a competitive advantage for them. So, for us, seeing sort of the mainframe community, I think, there's always going to be people that are going to look at it of, oh, geez, this is someone not mainframe coming here. Okay, it is what it is, right? But even when I've started talking with people, when Misty's not been around, about this, they generally are all thinking, yes, like, it's great that we're having this conversation. It's great we're not in our own little corners, making this up on our own, bickering, thinking about this. We're coming to the table to do this jointly because we realize we're all stronger together versus doing it separately. And I think I think that's sort of the other level I look at this and say, this is exactly what an effort like this is for. This is exactly what, of the 1,000-some projects we hear of the Linux Foundation, this is exactly what it's about, is bringing these people together in the open to have a greater outcome than any of them could individually achieve on their own.
I think I love the mainframe, and I think that's right. This better together notion. But when your mindset changes to that, then you start to think differently. You start to think, okay, if it's an and, then how do I interoperate? How do I share data? How do I, optimize or determine the best place for work to go? And so just by introducing the word and, it helps create that range or that need for range. And I think that's an important aspect of what the group's trying to accomplish. Because if the word was or,
made people pick a choice right up front. Yeah.
Right. And then that's not necessarily what's best for the business. And so I think you hit on the right word, and just that word will drive some of the range that we're looking for.
I want to point out that the range is the mainframe and, which is the middle. But we're also going to include in this umbrella both ends, right? So the people that want to live and modernize on that mainframe and stay on that mainframe, as well as the people that want to move off of that mainframe and move completely to the cloud. We've invited the cloud providers. All of them are invited to join, and they're going to be talking about this side of that equation, right? All of the mainframe and cloud, as well as the moving off the mainframe to cloud. And we have invited the mainframe community, and they'll be talking about this end. And there'll be a lot of happy space here in the overlap, and there'll be the stress here on the edges.
But you might also see that start to come together. You might see the people that come here and over here, they just kind of, oh, well, this isn't so bad over here. And they start to look over there, and vice versa.
So look, I'm not here to paint the cloud people with a broad brush. I don't know if necessarily they're in the mainframe or, right?
No, they're not, but they definitely, have, all of them working with Micro Focus have practices that move people off of the mainframe. They have mainframe migration services. That is definitely a portion of their business, but it's not their entire business, right? So that's what I meant by they have this edge, but they also have the stuff in the middle as well. And that's where Peter was saying earlier that, you know, IBM has this collaboration with AWS. You know, we're not enemies across this industry, right? You know, there's certain things that they may not like about what AWS is doing, right? I think there's an IBMer that sheds a tear every time a mainframe is turned off. You know, okay, you know, but there's lots
There's a
and lots
bunch
of
of
space under
IBM
this umbrella.
shareholders that do.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
that.
fortunately, there's not too many mainframes that get turned off.
No,
So
they-
Or
that's
getting
the good
turned on,
news.
in fact.
That's exactly
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
But you know what my, not fear, but Misty, again, why I think you've got a tough road. I don't want to analogize it to politics, but you hear a lot of people today, right? The vaccine deniers, right? And they'll look at all of the science behind why vaccines work and say, well, I don't care.
Yeah.
Right? Because my opinion is vaccines are bad. And that's your opinion, and your opinion goes to the edge of your nose. As soon as it comes to the edge of my nose and it affects me, I really don't give a hoot about your opinion. I care about the truth.
Right.
And the problem is when you have this whole gamut, this whole spectrum of people putting in their truth, it gets hard for the end user to say, who do I believe here? What is, because sometimes there's more than one truth, sometimes there's only one truth. Truth is truth is truth. There's opinions and then there's truth. How are you supposed to
You know what,
analyze?
Alan? What you're describing is the current state. That's what customers and organizations are getting today. They get one truth from one side, they get another truth from another side, they get another truth from another side. What we're hoping to do is to try to bring those players together and get them to agree on at least this set. We kind of agree on this set, and these are the things we don't agree on, and we'll document that we don't agree on those things, and we'll just make it a little bit less muddy.
Would you see
So
this?
I'm not expecting to get everybody to agree on everything. There's no way.
No.
Right?
And I would think that like some of that vendor neutrality angle is also going to help. You know, it's not Micro Focus saying this, it's not IBM, it's not Broadcom, it's not this, it's this group of everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to focus on the things you can agree on. You know, that's a far better place than where we are at the moment. So, you know, if you get that subset and then you just keep working it, you keep working it over time as that trust gets built up.
Little victories.
I think, you know, now that I'm thinking about that analogy of the standards making bodies, I think I need to do a little research into the history of some of those organizations and the challenges that they've had, because I think I'm going to have similar problems. But let's take a second to look at this from the customer perspective, right? You're an organization, you know that your IT stack is not meeting your current needs of your business. The market is changing too fast and you can't turn around changes quickly enough, whatever, right? What do? You go and you ask 6 different vendors and you get 6 different answers. What we're trying to do is to give them the one place where they can start, get a little bit of education, and then they go to the 6 different vendors with some knowledge. That's really what our goal is here, is to try to help them get that starting set of knowledge, the list of questions they should be asking, and then they'll come to the vendors.
Agreed. Guys, we're running low on time. Misty, not to put you on the spot, but can you give us maybe a little timeline of what's going on here?
Yes. So the first meeting I'm going to try to schedule in October sometime. I'm waiting to see the people signing up. So please, if you're interested, sign up. There'll be a blog post that the Open Mainframe project is publishing that will tell you how to get involved. And when I see the critical mass and I think we have enough people, I'll schedule that first meeting for October. It might be November. We'll have to see. at that first meeting, the first question we have to answer is, are we a mainframe modernization working group or are we a modernization working group? And the reason for that is my original concept was mainframe modernization. A couple of people have brought it up to me that these modernization concepts that we're talking about are pretty much the same no matter what technology you're talking about, right? So a lot of what we're going to be doing isn't mainframe specific, and it includes technologies across the stack. So we'll put that up for a vote of what we want to focus on. And then the second thing we're going to do is just make sure everybody's clear on the do's and don'ts and our goals. What are we trying to accomplish together? A little bit, if they've watched this webinar, then they're good. I won't have to say it all over again. And then we need to start building out our plan of how we're going to go about this. Over the next couple of years, because this is not going to be a quick thing, job one is agree on a definition, right? Give us that definition that has that broad umbrella. Job two is to agree on a framework and a process for which people can nominate educational content, and it can be reviewed and approved by the group. And that's how we're going to make sure we're not getting marketing materials or vendor specific stuff or biased things into the repository. So we need to agree on that process, and then we can start building out that repository. Towards the end of the project, after of the working group, after we feel like we have critical mass of the content, we want to do an assessment of the current state of modernization across all of those verticals, across all of those options, and identify if there are gaps that the Open Mainframe project and open source code can fill. So we'll be giving John a wish list of future projects.
That's okay. That's okay. We have a strong community that's excited to take those on.
All right. Hey guys, we're about out of time. Misty, I'm going to make you promise to come back on here and keep us current on progress on this group and what's happening.
I will never turn down a chance to talk about mainframes and modernization. So you got me.
All righty. Peter, we'd love, I know this was your first time on, but we'd love to have you back on. We often miss the IBM folk on here, to tell you the truth. And we'd like to see more of you.
I would love to come back. I'm looking forward to it.
All righty.
And Alan, if I can just throw out a little thank you to Pete, because thank you so much, IBM, for contributing and engaging with this new working group, right? You're going to be a key player in it. So I'm really happy to see you joining us on this first webinar. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Got to be in it to win it, man.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
All righty. John, thanks to you, the Linux Foundation, and the Open Mainframe Project, as always, for your partnership and cooperation on this. Most of all, thanks to you, folks who have been watching. I hope you found it interesting. Yes, modernization and mainframes go together. Stay tuned. We're going to be telling you more about it in the weeks and months to come. But until next month, this is Alan Schimmel for the Open Mainframe. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. You know, I was almost going to put...
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotek conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotek conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
Hey everyone, happy Monday! Cody J. Brown here with some upcoming programs from Techstrong Learning. So first up, tomorrow, Tuesday, September 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern, OpsMX is hosting a panel discussion on accelerating and securing Argo CD software deliveries at scale. Our panelists will discuss the challenges and solutions modern enterprises face when scaling continuous delivery. Following, at 1 p.m. Eastern, we are joined by my friend Jonathan Vogel at AWS as he takes us through an interactive lab workshop titled Transform IT Operations with Machine Learning Powered Solutions for AWS. You will learn how you can leverage Amazon DevOps Guru, a fully managed AIOps solutions from AWS, to detect, diagnose, and optimize infrastructure performance. And our final program tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern is a panel discussion on auto-scaling Kubernetes applications with continuous optimization. Stormforge has gathered industry experts to explain the auto-scaling challenge and how you may be leaving cost savings on the table. So that's all I have for you right now, but as a reminder, we do have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs for you here at Techstrong Learning, so stay tuned.
The Engineering the Change Scholarship Program offers a life-changing opportunity for a winner from an underrepresented community to change their lives by becoming a full-stack software developer.
The background that you might see that it's a weakness, it's a strength in this field because everyone is constantly looking for people that are going to bring new ideas.
It's an intense 12-week course that is not for the timid.
For real, who's mastering this right now? Because I sure am not.
So you guys are badass. Like as a class, you guys are crushing it.
You've got to be dedicated. You've got to be ready to do it. Your life has to be ready for it. Follow us as we go through this cohort's Engineering the Change winner on their journey to becoming full-stack engineers.
Welcome! Say with great power comes great responsibility.
Take it down to 3 finalists. Toria, I'm going to ask you, who really kind of stood out for you?
The 3 people that stood out to me the most was Stephanie and another woman named Carly and a man named Donald.
Mitchell, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. Actually, I think those are 3 great candidates, and I mean, you know very well, right, what it takes to go through this process.
Look, I still love good written and oral skills. I like people who can speak well. I like people who really can write well.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you something. To your point about Stephanie, is it Stephanie Sanchez? Yeah, Stephanie Sanchez. Her essay was one of the best essays I've ever read in the 3 or 4 times we've done this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And bring her into
the golden buzzer.
Right?
So,
she's in.
The 2 other people you mentioned, to me, Carly epitomizes why we do this.
Yeah.
She said something like, her brothers could do it, why couldn't she? Mm-hmm. Right? Wasn't that in the essay?
Yeah. That's something that stuck with me, especially as a woman.
Yeah.
Because I think that for her, she was like, if they can do it and there's not enough women in tech, like she was like, I can do it too. And I love that.
I say send Carly to Hollywood.
Golden buzzer?
Yeah. Donald Bazell Really nice guy. What I liked about his essay is his genuineness. Is that a word?
Yeah, being genuine.
He's genuine.
Yeah.
Right? You got it from him. My only caveat on this is he really doesn't have any tech experience.
Yeah.
So if it's your vote and Mitchell, you don't object, I say let's give Donald the last ticket to Hollywood. And those are our three finalists for Engineering the Change. Let's bring them in for interviews and pick our winner.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
Sounds
All
good.
right. We'll see you on the next show.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with David Williams, who's Senior Vice President for Market Strategy for Quali, and we're going to be talking about the impact the economic downturn might be having on DevOps teams and what are the implications thereof. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be here.
We've seen a lot of focus, of course, on developer productivity of late, but the downturn kind of focuses the mind a little bit. So I don't want to go and say that it's a full-blown recession yet, but it would seem that as we go along here, there's going to be a lot more interest in automating processes because we do need developers to be more productive. So what does that look like?
Well, you see, when DevOps came around, the world was in a different place. So as you've explained, we're looking at two things that are happening. One is obviously a tightening of belts in regards to investments and how DevOps practices are being implemented. But that's being also driven by the fact that obviously the economy is having a bit of a troubling time, depending on what day of the week you wake up on. But also the maturity of DevOps has grown significantly over the last 5 to 6 years. I'd say that it's become mainstream. It's very unusual to do software development without a DevOps type approach going on. And ironically, when DevOps was an egg and it was still being developed, it really didn't have things like cost management as being an inhibitor to execution. So as I say, it is growing up, and DevOps generally has become more accountable to outcomes and the bottom line. So that means that unfortunately things have got to change slightly in respect to the governance. It's got to be implemented to make sure that DevOps is delivering the value that it needs to and is accountable. So as I say, in a crisis, things come to a point, and as investment starts to be tightened up and people are looking at where to invest first, second, and third, they need to understand what's going on.
How do you go about doing that? Because frankly, when times were good, developers were consuming cloud resources, especially something that kind of looked and felt maybe like drunken sailors on a Saturday night. But if that's the approach that had been taken, how do I kind of instill a little bit of discipline without completely freaking everybody out?
Well, you see, it's a mixture of things. And when you talk to the analysts, they'll talk, it's a mixture of processes and organizational design, and as well as the technology that's applied to it. But at the end of the day, when it comes to accountability to the bottom line, budgets and cost management is done as a top-down type of practice. DevOps and the implementation around agile practices has been a bottoms-up type of practice. So sooner or later, those things were going to have a collision, and that's what's happening now. So what's really being approached by a lot of companies is that, especially when they're adopting infrastructure as code practices, which enable you to get extremely good ability to provision cloud infrastructure as part of the code development. It enables lots of I'd say more sophisticated activities to be done by people who have software development as their primary objective. So infrastructure has become more, I say, accountable to the business. How much cloud am I using? Why, when, and how? And when you're actually got your developers who can provision and spin up resources very, very quickly using a piece of code, then obviously that piece of code now needs to be a little bit more accountable to who owns it, what it's doing, and how it can get prioritized against all the other things that are provisioning cloud sources, so you can budget accordingly. But that's that with that in mind, the accountability to IAC or infrastructure as code, or even you're doing your configuration technologies that go out there and provision infrastructure, there needs to be an ability to be accountable to what you're using and also be guided in how it's being used. So that means that, you can't measure what you can't see. And now the business is saying, we need to see what's being done. They're not going to inhibit development. That's going to cripple innovation, and that would be that would be terrible. So what they're really doing is saying, we just need a way with which to allow our development organization to innovate, but with accountability to the bottom line and the business budgets. And that is where the crux is happening at this very moment in time. That's where we are today.
When I talk to finance people, it's not always so much about they want to reduce costs. That's a nice to have and get it. But really, it's about predictability of costs. And the thing that they get freaked out about is when there's a monthly bill that pops up that they weren't expecting. So is that part of the discipline, is just making people understand that, we need a regular cadence on cost, not so much that we want to drive 50% out of the budget per se. We just want to understand what's being spent when and where.
Yeah, it's understanding. I don't think anybody would be saying, we're going to reduce our cloud spend by a significant amount. That's not going to be happening. In fact, if anything, I would imagine cloud spend is going to increase as the need to reduce costs and the scalability that provides, lends itself. But, we're moving in a different world now. So we come from a world of tangible. From a finance perspective, we come from a tangible. So tangible to things you can touch, assets and things that have a depreciation life cycle. So exactly what you're buying and it's got an ROI, and you look at it. Well, unfortunately, that's not how things are provisioned today. Everything's intangible. You don't own what you use. You lease it, for want of another term, and you use it for the time you need it, and it goes away. So not only is it not yours, but it's temporary. So even if you're using it in production, the cloud providers will move things around in their own, to optimize their own resources. So optimization requires you to have a plan. You need to understand what your spend is going to be. And I think what we've done for the last, the last half a decade at least, is we've got a good grip on what we've spent. So everybody does a sort of like a cat herding exercise where they're trying to gather all the costs and trying to work out what the value was. And now it's got to a point where the business is saying, before you provision things and before you do things, we need to understand, one, who's using it, why they're using it, and when is it going to be used, and how much resources are you going to be using. So it means that the technology that has to be associated with provisioning has to take much more of an accountability role in regards to the ownership and the allocation of resources in a smarter type of way.
Can I capture that data in real time? Because part of the issue is by the time I get a bill, it's too late to do anything about it. So how can I get in front of these things?
Well, there's loads of ways that the organizations are looking at it. First of all, there is less entrepreneurial thing, as you mentioned earlier on, when it was a little bit more of the Wild West. So a whole bunch of different teams or individuals within teams could provision what they liked in support of an outcome that they themselves needed, that understood the value of. Now what's happening is governance is coming in much more into play. So configurations and models are coming in. So instead of actually creating something from afresh every single time, it's leveraging existing known state. So it's having much more accountability to a historical record of what's been used before, and then extrapolating that need going forward, but also being much more reactive and being more accountable to all the different nuances that will be using the cloud. So as different teams use the cloud, that's got to be captured, but also extrapolated so they understand what it would be going forward as well as what it's going back, which is the difference, I think, today, because up until recently, very much it was, what is cloud costing you? And I need to account that to a cost of some description based upon a value. And then I will work out whether that was prioritized accordingly. But now you've got to work out, okay, what are you using? How are you using it? And you've got more planning going into it. So IAC and different, the sort of things that are used to provision the cloud have got to be much more accountable to an outcome. So you've got to look at the value that you're achieving and then tie that back to what it takes to achieve it. So it's a little bit of a more guardrails, more governance, but again, being very careful not to inhibit innovation. It's a very delicate balancing act to do, to say, use what you need to get what we need done, but use it within reason and optimize things much more effectively so everybody's not reinventing the wheel. Create models, make sure we're leveraging known state type of infrastructure. And so it's just it's getting smarter as they're going forward. So technology itself has got to be more accountable to what it's provisioning and why going forward, as well as looking back. And that means that the organizations have got to have much more governance around how they're provisioning infrastructure.
Are there algorithms that will save us from ourselves? Can we throw AI at this stuff and then we don't have to worry about it? I mean, how smart can the whole thing get?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that much more, there's a lot more, I'd say, I wouldn't say artificial intelligence is a bit of a stretch, but I would definitely say the ability to be more smarter around how you provision and what's being used and why. I think accountability has never been really tracked. So if you and I were developing our own code and we were provisioning the infrastructure to support that release of what we were doing, we would do it as an instance. So for example, looking at how costs are done from a pipeline perspective really helps. So as code is continuously released into production, the ability to understand what it took to be able to do the development, the testing, the releasing, and into production, and tying those infrastructure costs together to see the end-to-end of a pipeline release. That sort of intelligence is required. So you need to be able to tie things together that have a common objective and not treat everything as an individual nuance within a pipeline. And also the ability to be able to, consolidate and optimize your resources by having a greater understanding about cross-team collaboration. So it's no good every single team, duplicating the wheel. So I think the technology that's coming out is much more around life cycles, understanding what's being used. If it's not being used, then deprovision it. So no more things sitting out there waiting for someone to notice that it's costing money before they do something about it, but associating a use with an actual value and a cost and making sure that it's managed that way subliminally in the background whilst enable the developers to do their work. But as I say, that's the balancing act. So it's much more around ownership, purpose, and also making sure that you do that with a reduced risk of things being open up for attack. So you've got to be much smarter around how things are provisioned today in the cloud. It's no longer in the hands of just writing something, provisioning it, and letting it go.
And it seems like more organizations are using multiple clouds. So is it getting harder to do all that because we are trying to figure out which workload goes where based on cost?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, data sits in different places. When you look at edge computing, you're looking at infrastructure being at the edge within a local environment. So retail stores that will be sitting out there. And as more intelligence and more information gets to the edge and uses the cloud as a centralized resource, obviously you've got to have a hierarchical way of looking at how infrastructure provisioned from end to end. So it has got more complex, but I think that the technology today is associating infrastructure with, the cost of doing an objective and outcome. So it's getting smarter in respect to having different teams working, or at least being seen as being a collaborative source in support of an outcome. And also it's looking at the end-to-end view. So technology has got to look above and beyond one cloud. That's why it's going to be difficult for companies that are looking purely at one cloud infrastructure or one method of provisioning as being the utopia, because that's not reflective of how applications are developed today. They are pretty hierarchical. They have data at different levels. They share data across the board. They have different hierarchies. So you've got to look at it really from the application perspective and understand how the application is using the infrastructure, and not look at it from different parts of infrastructure and try to, goat herd the whole thing together and make sure that it makes sense. So it's really much more application-centric thinking as opposed to infrastructure and working out what it's doing thinking.
How hard is it to set all this up? Because a lot of the DevOps environments have been around for a while. They're a little more rigid than maybe originally envisioned. So how do I insert something like this into an existing process?
It's really weird. The way that things are provisioned is really around ownership and governance. So I think once the outline has been given in regards to what the objective is. So for example, if you are going to be managing multiple modules within an application, and they are all being delivered ongoing 24/7, then the ability to look at it from an application-centric view, I think that what's happened is in the past, it's looked from it very much from an object view or a team view or a very specific app. So now you look at it as a set of services, and the services have got to be associated with a level of cost management. So you've got to look at how much is that cost going to be impacting my business. And what that means is that when development today is done, some of it's done for the delivery of active services and active applications that are front and line to the business. Others are done much more of a background process. So I think the way that companies are doing this is basically prioritizing what their spend is. So once you understand what your most important applications are and don't treat them as a generic, then that's it. So actually understanding, to answer your question, prioritizing the workload in respect to what the outcome is going to enable people to actually put some governance in place that enables them to provision accordingly what they need from the cloud. And if they do need to optimize cloud usage, that's based upon what the outcome, and then you can actually do that in a much more effective way. So it's going to be a little bit of a path for people that have been entrepreneurial for the last decade in doing this. But I think that a lot of companies are moving this way anyway, because the way that applications have come online recently with the modern development practices, most of them have governance now as part of their implementation. And what needs to be done is more of an organizational design practice, where it's just not the technology, but the people that are using it need to understand what their priority is and how they're going to be allocated resources in respect to other parts of the business. So it really is much more of a cost management, dare I say it, or a governance perspective. It's no longer around a freedom of just build it and they will come. It's got to be done in a prioritized way. So it's going to take a while for companies to do it. But if they have technology that looks at the infrastructure as a provisioned application-based outcome, as opposed to a activity-based outcome, then that really helps. So that helps the end-to-end view, and it also helps prioritize what work you do against what work I do, that enables people to actually do the cost management more effectively.
Does it surprise you that it's taken us this long to get to this point? Because what you're really describing is organizations behaving like grown-ups, right?
No, this has been, the industry is a long tail. So I think eventually when DevOps has always been an entrepreneurial practice, it's enabled agility, things 24/7, increased in value. That's always been let loose, and you have to let it loose to a degree to make sure that the value that you associate with it is actually being realized in some form or another. And I think even though DevOps has changed its flavor in many ways, where you're connecting the development practice with the operational values that come out of it, I think that most of the applications that are being developed now have that in mind. So even though I think that the early stuff was probably more fragmented than it is today, there are much more team-like capabilities that go across the process. And I think that organizational dysfunction pretty much feeds tool dysfunction. So as you start applying technology to individual silos, you're going to create lots of silos that don't collaborate. And I think as companies start looking at the application view, and as the more mature applications, not just the front end applications, but now the back end applications start looking at the value they're providing at that end to end view, it's going to make the ability for the to plan all the way through to develop, test, release, operations, that sort of life cycle. That's looked at as a holistic, it's a manufacturing line. It's no longer a set of silos. So once the silos are broken down, then this will happen. But DevOps traditionally has come from more of a DevOps development side. The operation side now, the applications have got to a point where they start to really come to fruition, where developers have much more of a shift. They can shift right, if you like, into the operations environment. That's enabled these type of practices to become a little bit easier to manage, and therefore the infrastructure is now accountable at all parts of a software development lifecycle.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Money still talks. Hey, David, thanks for being on the show.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Paul Truelove, who is the CEO for SecureAuth, and they have launched Arculix, which is a product that enables you to manage access to infrastructure without having to rely on passwords. So it looks like we're moving the ball forward, as they say. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Appreciate the time.
So walk us through, how is it that we can get past using passwords to access infrastructure? Because, frankly, society has been relying on passwords since the first caveman grunted, "Who goes there?" So what exactly are we doing here, and what's changing?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey that we've been on. In some ways, we've been talking about passwordless, for probably 10 years plus. I think the key change that has to occur is organizations have to embrace a passwordless authentication framework, as a reality, and something that can not only replace the utilization of passwords, but maybe more importantly, do a better job than passwords could ever do at, simplifying the user experience of authentication and improving, security, not just to the core infrastructure, but really to any application or data store that a user might try to gain access to. So, I think what is beginning to happen is the bow wave, of interest, because the technology is advancing to a point where people can have confidence without leveraging passwords as one of the authentication methodologies that they're using. And maybe before I hand it back to you, I'll make one other comment. One of the challenges I think people have with passwordless is many times the authentication journey might start out as a passwordless journey, but revert in an adaptive authentication mindset to ultimately add a password back in, when another authentication method isn't either working or isn't providing a sufficient level of assurance. And so unfortunately, I think a lot of people on the journey to passwordless have ultimately put passwords back into that adaptive flow and created the same scenario that we're in today, which is passwords are still, part of the authentication framework, and fabric for most organizations.
How hard is it to make this transition? What's involved? What do I have to set up? Because I think a lot of people are just intimidated by the whole process. So they're kind of like, well, we have passwords and that's what we know how to use, but how do I get from point A to point B?
Yeah, I think if you think of it in a very simple framework of people, process, and technology, the technology in this case, I actually think is the easiest part. There are solutions like what SecureAuth recently announced GA around Arculix that provide the technology piece, and that's a pretty straightforward implementation for most organizations, whether they're implementing it for their workforce, their B2B partners and supply chain, or their consumers and citizens. What really has to change in order for us to accelerate this paradigm shift is the people and the process. So organizations internally have to get comfortable with an authentication process that does not rely on passwords, that replaces passwords with other authentication mechanisms that are then implemented through the technology. And maybe most importantly, we have to get people comfortable with this evolution on both sides of the equation. As a user, I have to become comfortable that when I don't see a prompt for a username and a password, that I'm still securely authenticating and logging into, the underlying application or infrastructure, or data storage accounts. And on the the company side, I have to get comfortable that while I may not be prompting for those same authentication factors that have historically at least served me to a certain point, I'm actually increasing the security of my overall authentication methodology as part of that transition. So if you just go back to that triad of people, process, and technology, I think in most cases technology isn't really the barrier. We now have technology that can serve this need. It's really getting the people in the process aligned so that we can embrace it more holistically.
One of the dirty little secrets of IT is that IT people create backdoors into infrastructure all the time because, they're just generally lazy and looking for a way to make things a little bit simpler for them. But the bad guys know about this and start hacking into those backdoors. So can we eliminate the need for people creating these backdoors in the first place if we go passwordless?
I don't want to assault any of the IT professionals that are hopefully listening to this today, but I would acknowledge that continues to be an issue that we see crop up from time to time, and ultimately the goal should be to eliminate all of those legacy methodologies that users, regardless of whether they are a standard user or a privileged user, use to gain access into the infrastructure. So if I universally replace that architecture with a passwordless infrastructure as my primary authentication mechanism, then we can eliminate a lot of those backdoors as you referenced. But it's not again, you have to go back to people and process more than just technology. You have to be willing to say the only approved authentication methodology in this organization for this infrastructure or this application is the passwordless technology, and therefore everything else is going to be shut off and eliminated.
Should we basically assume that usernames and passwords are on the dark web? I mean, it seems like credentials have been stolen left, right, and center. So are we at a point now where it just doesn't make any sense to keep using username and passwords as our methodology because, frankly, it's all compromised anyway?
I think it's a very fair statement. And whether it is already compromised or easily compromised, is essentially one and the same. I think if you look at the account takeover attacks, that we continue to see, I know, whether it's at a work level or personal level, I get all kinds of emails, I get texts, I get, a variety of different attack mechanisms hitting, me every day, trying to gain access by having me share something that can then be utilized, to act on my behalf as a malicious attacker. And so I think as long as that continues to be true, and there's no indication that it will ever go away, moving to a methodology where you get beyond just something I know that can easily be captured and shared and then reused to emulate me as a person to something I either have or an activity based on biometrics or other types of data, then that's much harder to emulate and much harder to share, on the dark web as a attack takeover paradigm.
Yeah. There doesn't seem to be anything such as perfect security, so people are working their way around multi-factor authentication, but I guess the goal here is just to raise the bar. I mean, I don't think we're promising people that everything will be innately secure just because they shifted to a passwordless approach.
Correct. I think anybody that would issue a unanimous perspective that whatever they're doing is 100% secure and could never be hacked is just asking for trouble. What we have to think about as we look to protect sensitive data and other assets inside or outside of an organization, is what can we do to reduce the likelihood that someone who should not have access can gain access, either to data or take over systems. And in most organizations, that requires a layered approach to security, and authentication, is one of the first places organizations, need to implement. And I think over the course of the next several years, we need to advance the paradigm for authentication, forward by a couple of generations. But behind that, you have to have other systems as fallback. And it's one of the reasons that as we look at changing the way that authentication works, one of the things that we want to do is we want to bring in other data elements around security that we can leverage in order to get a better understanding of what's really happening. And so it's one of the reasons that our risk engine is such an important part of how we view this evolution of authentication, so that we're not just looking at, a simple username and password as an authentication factor. We're looking at a variety of data. We're pattern matching against normal activities that a user does relative to their peer set, relative to themselves. And if we see an anomaly, then we can begin to step up authentication. Or in the context of continuous authentication, we can actually remove that person from the system temporarily until we can ask them to re-authenticate in a way that they give the proper level of assurance given an increased risk factor that may have entered the system.
All right. So if I'm suddenly logging in from Venezuela and I've never been to Venezuela, you'll recognize that, right?
Recognize that and ask for more information around who you are in order to, bring the level of assurance up to the appropriate risk level before we let you continue. Or if all of a sudden we see another login on your same credentials, from halfway around the world, then we can, what we want to be able to do eventually is cancel both of those sessions and ask the users to re-authenticate. And if we do that at the right level, only the real person should be able to get back in.
Mm-hmm. How hard is it to set this whole thing up? I mean, do I draw a line in the sand and say from here on out, we're going to use this, or can I go back into all my legacy infrastructure and switch out the passwords for this approach?
So it really is a crawl, walk, run type of model. You don't have to, in order to start taking advantage of a passwordless authentication mindset, you can decide where you want to start and how wide you want that to reach within your organization. So we see a lot of companies start with a specific group of users. For example, we've got an opportunity that we're looking at now where Mac users are the place that organization is struggling the most, because they, the Mac operating system is just fundamentally different than, the majority of their environment. And so we're going to help them implement a passwordless authentication framework for those Mac users. And then once that's in place, we can step into the other, computing systems, whether that is a Windows environment or, a true virtual computing environment. And you can do the same thing from an application perspective. One of the things that we believe is very important, and we've designed our Arculix product to support this, is not having to replace all of your existing, identity IDP infrastructure in order to take advantage of a new authentication mindset. And so, being able to layer authentication over a variety of IDPs without having to swap out all of that, infrastructure, which for most organizations is where the heavy lift would really happen. This allows you to start down a passwordless journey on each authentication provider or each identity provider, on a stepwise basis. So you can shift a portion of your infrastructure, a portion of your applications, also a portion of your users, and kind of, crawl, walk, run your way into moving to, a true passwordless journey for the entire enterprise.
Now, this platform is based on technology you guys acquired. So where do we go from here? What's next?
Yeah, that's correct. We made an acquisition last October of a company called Accepto, and they were really leading in driving a next generation authentication paradigm based on a risk engine that is a heavy or heavily leverages AI and ML as part of that process. So the announcement that we made today is really GAing a rebranded version of that with, some important enhancements as we've come to market. What's next is continuing to build out that platform. It's one of those things in technology, especially in identity and access management, the work is never done. So one of the things that we are prioritizing very high is, the orchestration capabilities, so that, we recognize that every organization implementing an authentication platform may want to tune it to be slightly different based on their, whether it's workforce, whether it's, partners outside the organization, whether it's consumers. And that can be one of the areas that organizations spend a lot of time and money customizing. And so what we want to do is get people out of that customization mindset into a configuration mindset, where they're really using a low code or no code, platform to define the user journeys that they want authentication, paths to follow, without having to go in and build and hard code a lot of policies and other things, in order to implement that variability for each of their user populations, each of their infrastructure application targets. And, you look at that on a company by company basis, there's, tremendous amount of differences in the way people will implement. So that's a big area and a big push for us over the course of the next several months.
What is the biggest challenge in getting people to make this transition? Is it simple inertia? Is it people who just assume that everything has a username password? Or is there a technical challenge?
I think it's primarily inertia right now. The technical challenges are being solved. And like I said earlier, people and process tend to be the things that sometimes are harder to change in a line of business. So, getting the technical team on board that this is a safe and effective approach to securing corporate assets can be done fairly easily. Getting the business to change the way that a user, works and interacts with the system, that could be, a little bit longer discussion. And then getting people comfortable that the changes that are being rolled out still provide them the safety and security that they're looking for, in their digital lives is that third important element. So a lot of this comes down to, education and training of the populations and the people behind the scenes, that are supporting the technology.
Who's taking the lead on this? Is it the security team, or is it more likely to be an internal IT team that's just sick and tired of dealing with password, username changes, and updates?
I would say all of the above and more. Historically, authentication and access management, tended to be a very operational, side of an IT organization. As the digital transformation of most enterprises has accelerated, that's come squarely into the CISO or head of security's, frame of mind and the way that they think on a day-to-day basis. But importantly, we're also starting to see a shift where business is pushing an agenda here as well. I talked to a client recently that said one of the reasons that they are moving on this today is they are looking at next generation authentication as a way to simplify their employee experience and ultimately improve retention and recruiting efforts. So if you think about, especially an employee that has high levels of access to a lot of different systems, they may have to re-authenticate dozens and dozens of times a day. And that is weighing on job satisfaction. It's weighing on, employee recruiting efforts, to bring new people into the enterprise that maybe aren't used to security being forced upon them like older generations of workers, but want to feel safe and secure without having that heavy pressure, that we business a long time have become accustomed to. So that line of business coming into the conversation, supporting what security wants to do, supporting what the operations team wants to do, but really helping them think a little bit differently is beginning to change the conversation, I think, in a very important way.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Next time somebody wants you to change a username and password, there's a better way to think about it. Hey, Paul, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. Appreciate the time. Thanks.
All right. And now back to you guys in the studio.
is Techstrong TV.
Hey, we're back at Yala. It's actually a little quieter. I think everyone this session.
Right. The sessions are great. I mean, we don't blame them that they want to go to the session.
Well, you would think that's what they come for. But I will tell you, I was talking to Sharon Zitzman earlier. You can't underestimate the hallway track.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And that is the one thing, Baruch, and I know you know too. So many companies over the last 2 years trying to do virtual events, hybrid, virtual, try to duplicate the hallway track, chat, video chat.
No,
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
It's not the same.
It doesn't work, and this is why in-person events came back with vengeance, because people missed it. And you get the same learning.
You can see sessions anyway.
Right, and let's pretend that people actually watch them when they have like all the distractions.
Team tabs open and the TV.
Exactly, right. So even the learning is less, but networking online like does not exist, right?
Doesn't work.
You have to be there. You have to hug the people, speak with them, mingle with them. Mingling is the face-to-face activity.
Absolutely. And it brings the energy. You feel the energy.
Absolutely.
It's hard to feel energy online.
The adrenaline doesn't kick in when you watch sessions on your monitor. Yep.
So here at Yala, we have like 700 people who sold out. Look, several things. I mean, we hit on one of them is the whole in-person thing.
Right.
The move to, as I think Shlomi called it, the DevOps of things, right? The edge and IoT.
I call it the next frontier. The next frontier. The next computing frontier.
But I'm going to tell you, in the last couple of months, I've been to KubeCon and Linux Foundation, open source, and RSA. To me, the fuel that is fueling developers, the whole ecosystem around the world, is open source.
Yes.
Right? Like never before. The open source is...
Every company is an open source company. Whether if you participate in open source, if your company sponsors an open source project, if the employees of the company participate in open source projects, but most important, everybody are consumers of open source. And there is no escape from it.
And it's worldwide.
You cannot do any meaningful work in IT without relying on open source projects of other people.
Absolutely.
Whatever you touch, you do containers, you do Docker, open source, you do Kubernetes, open source. You do
forget anything cloud native.
Anything cloud native
is almost by definition.
Right, and it doesn't matter. Even you are a C++ developer embedded, you do. It's an open source.
Open source.
There is no way you can lock yourself out from open source and not be an open source company. No way.
No, you can't exist.
Yep.
So I'm glad you agreed with me, because now I want to talk about this Persia project.
Right.
Talk to us about it.
Here's the thing, right? So you consume open source, and you do. As we said, there is no way around it. And where does it come from? Do you trust it? Is it available? Those would be like the three questions that are on everybody's mind, right? Because in the end of the day, you take someone else's code and you plug it into your production system. Is it code good enough? Someone decided that you want to use this library. Is this someone knows how to judge if this library is good enough? You might argue about the quality, you rate it, you check their GitHub, whatever, you see the open issues, you see the last commits, you see the velocity of the releases. There is some way that you can grade the quality of the open source project, fine. Maybe the grade worth something, maybe it's not. How about security? This is a very, very complicated issue. And I think Nati touched on, he gave an example in his keynote, how sophisticated attacks can be. And he was watching the Israeli intelligence officers sitting in the first row with the wink like, you guys know what it means, right? They are extremely complicated. And your line developer that needs to judge whether this open source is good or not, how can they trust that there is no some kind of a very well hidden, complicated, sophisticated, so like vulnerability hidden in there, lurking for those developers to jump on this library? You cannot expect developers to know all those things.
Yes.
Then what do? Then you hire a CISO, someone in Nati's caliber, and you go like, okay, Nati, now it's your problem. Go tell us if this open source is good enough or not. And then Nati goes like full batshit crazy about security, really tears it to pieces, plugs in all the research, uses all the efforts, and can come with an answer whether this library is secure or not. The problem is, it will take him 2 weeks, a month to get to this conclusion. But we are not in the world in which the developer who wants to use this library will wait for 2 weeks, for a month for this library to be approved. Fuck it. He'll just take a thumb drive, plug it in.
It's worse than that even. It's like PCI. No, do you know no one who was PCI compliant was ever breached?
Of course.
Because the moment you were breached, you were no longer PCI compliant. It's the same thing. It's secure as of this moment. Doesn't mean it's going to be secure the next moment.
No one knows. And whoever knows it in their silo and way too late.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, solution, as all the previous solutions that we have in the last decade, is obviously DevOps. Obviously DevOps.
Obviously DevOps.
DevOps solves this problem as well. Why? Because we bring down silos, we bring the security people into conversation, T-shaped, empower team, fine, perfect. Now what? It puts the security people, though, in an impossible
no-win situation.
Because they are now part of this very fast-pacing group that wants to deliver faster. They come to them and say, hey, we need an answer. Is this library good? We need to use it today. And they're like, I have no idea. Dude, that's the first time I see this code. There might be so many ways in which the problem can be there. And not only in the code, but also in all the supply chain of this library and all the other libraries this library was ever dependent on.
Yep.
And then someone in some shady GitHub library forgets to renew their email domain, and next thing you know, someone gets this domain, opens an email, sends a recovery request, gets the login into their NPM registry account, and next thing you know, you have, right? How security people in the DevOps story can win. And one of the tools that can help them is, at least in our belief, is Project Piercy.
I want to stop you right there, because now we're going to talk a little bit more about Project Piercy.
And for that,
we're going to bring in Fred
someone
Simon,
who knows this stuff.
All right, and here we go.
Boom!
And
Magic.
here is Fred.
Magic.
We beamed him in. So Baruch, all kidding aside, you very eloquently laid out the problem, and it's a big problem. And it has been a big problem. It continues to be. Fred, you're here now to make the case for Persia. Why is Persia the solution?
So before I go to Persia, I want to emphasize about the experience and the experience of this problem. When we actually launched Bintray, one of the speech was why my mother is choosing open source. And one of the main reasons for it is it's actually very, very hard for everyone to understand and to have a little bit of control and to know exactly what is coming in. And what we saw in recent year on global stage of information technology of the world is that decentralization is really a nice way to bring trust to people, because there is no central authority and there is no central information.
You don't need to trust me. It's really, I mean, we tried that. We've been there. We gained a lot of experience with, you can can trust us, really. No, we don't. Why wouldn't you trust us? We're nice. We don't trust anyone. Okay. It took us many years to get this, to learn this lesson, but I think we're there now. We understand, and we actually preach now. Don't trust us. Really don't.
Well, no, this is a big thing in security, right? Zero trust.
Exactly.
Right? You start off at zero trust.
So, zero trust in security is to identify every communication, every packet, and where they come from. But decentralization is more than zero trust. Decentralization is let's distribute the trust.
Okay.
Let's say, okay, if my friend, if the friend of my friend, or if the neighbors are all saying the same thing, it's probably going to be okay.
And this is like reputation.
Exactly. Among those who agree that this thing is a good thing, there are not only just strengths in numbers. Probably a lot of people say it's okay, it's okay. There are actually different actors that gained their trust through reputation.
Right.
Right. So if among those peers that all agree that it's okay, it's not only me and my neighbor, but also Docker registry, also NPM registry, also Maven Center, also the producers of Java and those who build those, and all of them agree that it's a good thing. Then, through this standardization, you have this trust. And again, this is a question for what we need to aim is security people, CISOs, trust, which is very hard to gain because in their job description,
trust no one.
Exactly. Right? So once we pass that, the next good thing is, since everybody agreed that it's a good thing, and everybody has the good thing, I don't have to go to the 1 point of failure that might be down to get this good thing, because everybody already have it.
Yeah, decentralization brings reliability because it's coming from different places. But there is one point about I need to be able automatically, and this is what we saw now with blockchain and ledger and decentralized ledger, which is readable by everyone and reputable, is that when my neighbors say that he did something, he cannot come 1 week later and say, no, I never said that. Okay, it's proven. So every identity is identified and trusted on the communication channel. And everybody that puts something on the communication channel is said this thing at this time.
We just lost 50% audience once you mentioned blockchain. So let's talk about that. Let's put those people back. So there is a lot of hype about Web3, blockchain.
Yes, there is. There's also been a lot of bad
and like hype in a bad way, and completely justified, right? There is a lot of empty hype riding through that, all this crap and what's not. But the core of the technology is solid. The only thing that we care about, the part of the
authority,
yes, is the ledger that cannot be hacked.
Yes.
And it's there. It's a good basis for everything else and all the hype on top of it that we don't care about. But the unhackable ledger, completely transparent, that everyone can download to their machine and verify that it was actually what those binaries come from the source that they supposed to come, and do what, and we have the chain of custody throughout the entire delivery. This is something that actually blockchain helps solving without all the crap of Web3.
Right, and cryptos and all that crap.
So what we were describing is that, okay, I ask my friend, I ask my neighbors, I ask my mom on the other side of the country or whatever. If I have to do that for every software packages that I want to download and try to take this decision, I didn't win anything. It's a freaking nightmare. Yeah. I need automation.
It's the same month.
I need the tools and I need the processes. And this is what the transparency log is giving me. It's this ability to automate those kind of questions and automate this kind of trust validation and trust system into the process, so that I have higher trust but higher automation and higher speed. I need to be able to move faster. Okay, if Yeah, I mean,
I get it.
Today,
today we
so
don't.
we solve number of problems. We provide all the benefits of it from source because it is built for source, not by us, but someone who everybody else trusts, and and it means that we can trust them as well. So it's like we build from source, but without the need to actually build something from source. And we also protect the delivery itself, right? The supply chain, by showing you that there is a chain of custody that cannot be tampered with, because again, the technology that we work there is trusted and proven, and you can actually look under the hood, because it's all open source, to trust the process. Once you trust the process, you can trust the outcomes. And this is how security people in our DevOps world can actually keep the pace with everybody else without being the bottleneck.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question though for our audience, where rubber meets the road. Let's take something like Log4j. How would of course we hope to be a happy ending, but how would Log4j, how would Persia have helped in the Log4j situation?
So first of all, the information about something is wrong with the specific Log4j version and those Log4j binaries that exist out there. You could have a malicious actor that does also says those versions are really, really bad, but is actually a malicious actor. So you identify clearly the source of the information and saying, okay, those Log4j. And then inside the system, you can trace back, because you know exactly what are the versions. You can trace back on your system who is using it and where it is, and provide it back. Now, what's going to happen and what we want to promote is the fact that you trust a source of information about the fact that you should not trust a binary. Right. Okay, that's the step for the system.
Right.
So it's a double.
Log4j is actually a very simple case. The vulnerability in Log4j is not a vulnerability at all. It's actually... It's not a defect. It's by design. It's feature by design.
No, it's a whole.
It's not a defect. It's exactly how it's supposed to work.
Microsoft used to say it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah. And this is actually a feature. Yeah. Now, what happened, and this is fascinating, is one morning the entire industry decided that this feature is too dangerous and needs to be considered a vulnerability, right? Now, we saw in the first hours or days when it hits the news, we saw kind of two approaches. The one run around in circles with their head on fire, shouting, "It's terrible, we are doomed, the sky is falling." And the others who say, "No, it's a feature, it works by design, just don't use it this way and you will be fine." And those two, it took days until they converged to something like, yes, we know how to protect, but it's better to have a new version in which this feature won't be available anymore. Yeah. This is what happened with Log4j. Now, where Persia comes to play. Until this feature was decided to be bad, there is nothing for us to do. There is a version, it has a debatable feature, it's fine. Once it explodes, and this debate starts, some people say, no, it's terrible. The other people say, it's fine. We will have those two pieces of information inside Persia network. Some of the nodes will declare Log4j particular version as terrible vulnerability. The other nodes will say, well, you know what, it's fine. It really works as designed, so there is nothing to complain. And then the public knowledge, not only you learn from it from Stack Overflow, Hacker News, and email that you get from DevOps.com, but you actually have this debate happening inside the network that provides your binaries.
Right.
And automatically, without you making anything, in one day, Log4j was downloaded just fine because the majority of the nodes agreed that this is a valid version. The next morning, your network will fix itself to block the same binary that was okay yesterday because the majority of the nodes, including the nodes that you trust, decided that, okay, you know what, you convinced us, it's terrible, let's block it. So this use case is perfect to see how the information propagation not only happens on social, but also happens in the bits and bytes, inside the technology of your...
But here was another big problem with Log4j. A lot of organizations didn't know where it was. Yes. They couldn't find how many instances it was running, and the average organization has X amount of applications.
We released some open source tools for all those environment and application to be able to detect the same also. We do that a lot, our research team, so to help you scan your runtime and your environment and find if you are vulnerable or not.
Right, that's the runtime. But the builds are completely safe with Persia.
Right.
Because in the next morning, it will just stop building because the same artifact will suddenly be declared as vulnerable.
But the picture is actually JFrog, and the JFrog platform for our customers, they get most of our customers.
That's one of the advantages of having
they get the picture of.
I give you another example. Struts 2. Struts 2.
Yep.
Right. Equifax.
Right.
6 months after the Equifax, people are still downloading.
Of course.
Yes.
The bad version.
Of course.
Right.
And that's exactly the same fix. You use Persia, the industry declared that this artifact is bad, done. You don't need to do anything, you don't need to know about it at all.
Well, there is something fundamental about the package management system before Persia, is that for a package manager like Maven, NPM, and all this stuff, once you release a package, it's immutable. It's package itself and its metadata, which dependency it has and which version, and it's very fundamental to a Maven inside the Maven.
So any build system,
any build system, once it's released in the public repository, it cannot change. You cannot add any more information for it.
Done.
It's
whatever you change will generate a new one.
Well, that's the beauty of immutable.
Exactly.
So that's why the transparency log of Persia here is very, very helpful, because information about this binary continue to live even after it's out there in the world and in release. So you need to be able to add more metadata and more information.
And this calls for more interesting scenarios than Log4j. The malicious scenarios in which someone tries to hack the supply chain, that's not what happened with Log4j. But if someone
it's happened with people putting up with the wrong Docker, a Docker repo
naming
with
a similar name and
double A instead of single A and this kind of stuff. Now this is completely cut off with Persia because the ledger will just show very clearly that there was an attempt of messing with the
hacking.
Right? Yeah. So we will see very clearly that this was an immutable binary up until there, and then it changed. It tries to keep the same name to confuse the users, but the ledger shows that it's broken, and this is why you won't be able to do it again without even you need to research it or to read about it in the news. And that's the big deal about it.
Yeah, hopefully nobody, not my friend, not my neighbors, and nobody will certify. I mean, people that are... The thing is, there is a lot of strength in crowd and crowdsourcing. Okay, some people need to spend some time looking at what's going on the open source environment and all those open source binaries. The problem is that if every developer, that is all of them, are using Log4j, need to spend the same amount of time and energy certifying, it's way too much. Okay, so PCA offers this crowdsourcing kind of environment that one guy that is authenticated, identified, and kind of trusted says something good about it, it's already.
Well, but you get to the critical mass situation where
Exactly.
Look, I believe Fred and Baruch
not so much, but it's okay. You don't need
Fred and Baruch, I'm good.
Exactly.
And Alan, trusted, golden.
If Alan, it's golden.
Of course.
So let me bring up another
If
thing.
we
though.
made Alan into a software repository, all the problems would
all
gone.
the world's problems,
Exactly.
we'd automate everything.
Exactly.
We automate all your problems. But
Exactly.
you know what? In today's world, so we live in the era of foundation.
Yes.
With open source software.
Yes.
And so we look at something like Persia, very nice. Does it only work with JFrog? I know it doesn't. It was a rhetorical question, we call it. But, is there a plan to put Persia with the Linux or the Open Source Security Foundation or CNCF?
From the start, Persia, we knew that we cannot do it alone because we tried.
That's what I was trying to
Because
say.
we tried and we learned from our experience.
It's not decentralized.
And that's
it's not open.
I promised you the quote from Infinity Wars when Loki suggests that Thanos should take him as a guide to conquer Earth.
Right.
Because he has a lot of experience with conquering Earth, Thanos asks if Loki considers a failure an experience, and Loki said, I consider experience.
Okay.
So we now have a lot of experience, and we know that we cannot do it alone. And Persia was never intended to be a JFrog project from the beginning.
Right.
And we have very important industry players that work all together, not with us, but all together on Persia, and that's Docker, that's Deploy Hub, that's Oracle, that's Huawei. Everybody building it knowing that no one will own it, because the second someone tries to own it, it defeats the purpose. Done. That it's like throw it away, bring the next one, right? And now what we, all of us, all those companies, all the contributors try to do the next step is, I think by the time this episode will go live, we will already know the results of Continuous Delivery Foundation, part of the Linux Foundation, voting on whether they
be part of CDF.
Should be a part of the CDF.
Very cool.
Right.
That would be great.
So this is our hopes. The voting is...
This is the place for us.
Absolutely.
Continuous deployment.
It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense, and hopefully that will happen. Hopefully it happened. That's the temporal thing is terrible.
It's a time thing, right? Let's not mess up our timeline.
Exactly.
Stuff.
Right?
It doesn't fit in the blockchain.
Right, because right away Fred won't be here then.
It's a right behind
It
situation.
could be Mr. Spark who gets burned
Exactly.
instead.
No. We need Fred to be here. In any possible future multiverse, Persia should be part of our life.
There is a pure causality link in the transparency log.
No alternative universe.
Okay. We're taking off here at Yala. All right.
We didn't even start.
So you know what? Stay tuned. We'll tell you if it made CDF. If not, there may never have been a Fred.
Exactly.
Who knows?
Exactly.
Well, we're gonna end it right there. We're at Yala DevOps still, though. We're gonna be back with some more interviews in just a minute.
This is Techstrong TV.
All right. Hey, we're back here at Yala. The noise is building up, which means, I don't know, maybe it's coffee time or something, but we've got people here. Our next guest is someone who we've had on Zoom Techstrong TVs many times. Did we interview? I thought we interviewed you at KubeCon.
Maybe 2019, before the world went to shit.
Before, yeah. Maybe it was LA. Were you in KubeCon Los Angeles?
Seattle. I think either
Seattle was the last one, or San Diego?
San Diego was also,
San Diego was the last one before COVID.
Yeah, so probably San Diego.
Okay, fair enough. Not Valencia recently.
No, I haven't. I've been to Valencia a week before KubeCon, but I couldn't go for the conference.
It was actually a good show.
Yeah. Beautiful town.
I loved Valencia. You too.
Yeah.
Right? It was the people were very nice. A beautiful, beautiful city.
Great food.
But you got to eat late.
Yeah.
We'll talk. But anyway, so for those who don't know, Lior Hayamovich is with Rookout. He's actually one of the co-founders of Rookout, right?
Yeah, I'm the CTO.
And I guess that begs the question is, Rookout, what do they do?
So Rookout is a live debugging and dynamic observability platform. What we do is we bridge the gap between engineers and their code. I mean, as engineers, we're so used to having our code at our fingertips. When we're working locally on our laptops, we can just pause, we can stop, we can edit, we can change. But once the code moves far away to production, to the cloud, to serverless, we have all those steps in the way, you know, CI/CD, Artifactory by JFrog, and those are super important components, but there are also barriers that prevent us from actually observing our code. And with the shift left movement, we expect engineers to own their code throughout the software development lifecycle, and especially in production, but they're blind. They can't see how their code is behaving, they can't see what gets executed, they can't see the same stuff that they're used to. And Rookout is all about bridging that gap. It's about bringing the developers the observability they need, the debugging capabilities they need to own their code end to end.
You know, and you know, when you're saying it, I'm saying to myself, of course. But the fact is, I think when we look at the whole DevOps mentality of CI/CD, you know, is bringing ops and dev together, was getting developers to be more involved in the CI/CD process, to deploying the software. But there wasn't. It's not a shift left in my mind. It's almost a shift right.
Yeah, exactly. I think we keep...
For developers, right?
We keep calling it shift left because supposedly we're moving responsibilities onto the developer. We're giving them responsibility over quality.
But you're not giving them visibility.
Yeah. We're giving them, they're responsible for quality, they're responsible for security, they're responsible for performance. But at the end of the day, it's not really shift left because those components aren't going away. They're staying right there where they are on the right side of the map.
Right.
But developers now own them. Now developers have to own production performance, they have to own production quality. So essentially we're moving developers right rather than shifting the workflow left.
But it's worse, but you're shifting their responsibility right, but you're not giving them, up until now, which is why I guess you need like a Rookout, you're not giving them the visibility they need.
But you have to, because how can they own it if you're not giving them the tools?
You know, so I come from the security world. In the security world, we had this a long time. The security people were responsible for security, of all things. But we had no visibility or responsibility pre-deployment to see if that code was good or not. So we would, I mean, think about the nonsense of the idea of that. How much software was never scanned for security
before production, and then all of a sudden you're in charge.
And now it's like, hey, don't you know this thing has a buffer overflow or a cross-site scripting error? Well, what do you want from me? I didn't see it till it went up on the web, and I scanned it from the internet, right? A third-party internet.
And now in software security, you scan.
It's become common.
You supposedly shift left. You scan everything. You do all the checks from the get-go.
Yep.
And security people are more in charge of the policy, while engineers are more responsible over the execution.
The security.
Yeah. And if you want engineers to own execution for quality, for security, you need to give them the tools they need. And their tools, while it's great to give them some tools around security, some tools around IT and cloud and compute, first and foremost, they care about their code. They need to see how their code is behaving in the real environment, in production. Because you don't want to hear from your engineers, it works on my machine, because nobody cares.
Absolutely. Now, it makes perfect sense that if we did this for the security people, we should do it for the developer as well. But at the end of the day, I've been on this kick lately. Are we putting too much on the developers? Should it be the developer's responsibility about how that the product or the application or the software, whatever you want to call it, is not performing as we'd hope or as planned?
The thing is, the world is moving toward everything is code. You have configuration as code. You have security as code. you have quality as code with automated testing stuff. Essentially, the developer is responsible, and we have eliminated much of the other elements. You no longer have IT racking up servers. You no longer have IT configuring firewalls and IDSs. You have eliminated. We eliminated those elements because they didn't provide enough value, and they've held us back in many ways. And if you want engineers to, and in fact, we've eliminated. There is nothing left to make. Thinking about serverless, there is nothing but code. Who is going to own it if not the developer who wrote the code?
No. That begs the other thing, which is, so we're going to take that as a given. Who better to own it but the developer who wrote the code? How much code does the average developer write?
I would say surprisingly little.
You think so?
Yeah, I'm seeing various benchmarks. I haven't seen anything up to date. Most benchmarks, while are pretty old, speak on single digits. I think today we might be double digits per day, but those are the numbers we're looking at enterprises. I think that's a huge part of the problem, because if you look at it at the end of the day, it's not just about writing the code, it's about delivering it. And delivering code is messy, it's complicated, there are a lot of considerations you have to take into place, and in that regard, it doesn't matter if the developer owns it or if somebody else owns it. You have to answer for quality, you have to answer for security, you have to answer for deployment, you have to answer for performance and availability. Somebody has to answer for it. We hope that by having the same person, it's going to be faster, but still we need someone to answer it, and that makes it longer. And I think that's why one of the ironies of software development is how much time and effort we see software developers spend on updating observability, on adding and removing log lines, adding and removing metrics. Those are lines of code. And if each engineer at the end of the day writes so many few precious lines of code, why waste their time on writing those if you can use a tool to automate that? If you can make that instantaneous and have less code focusing on observability and non-functional requirements, have more code on the business logic.
So that's the argument for Rookout. In the U.S., there was a president, Harry Truman, right? The end of World War II. His saying, he had a sign on his desk in the Oval Office. It said, "The buck stops here." And really, that's what this comes down to, is at the end of the day, whether it's on someone else's machine and it's the security people involved, or this one or that one, where does the buck stop? Who is ultimately responsible? We're saying it's the developer, because who else is better responsible?
I'm saying even more, even if the CEO is ultimately responsible, you still need the developer to fix it, because everything's sold.
Look, that's an old security. 100 years ago, I'm in security. That was our selling spiel. We'd go into the CEO and say, "How you look in stripes? Because you're going to go to jail." Right? If your security guy doesn't do whatever the compliance of the day was. Now, but the fact of the matter is, when something goes wrong with the software, today's CEO doesn't stand up and say it's my fault. It's those developers. I pay these people a fortune of money. They're the highest paid people here.
I'm hoping most people who are watching us have better CEOs and better managers who are going to own up. But even if they do own up, the CEO is not going to be the one to fix the code.
No, absolutely not. He doesn't even know the code.
Yeah, somebody at the end of the day has to dive into the code, figure out what's wrong, and fix it. And we see engineers spending so much time and effort trying to reproduce issues, trying to copy data from production to non-production environments. And they're spending so much time trying to make something appear in another environment, when all they really have to do is observe the bug or observe the feature in the environment that actually matters in production.
Absolutely. Now, so we've been skirting. What does Rookout do all of these things? How does it do it? I know it's more aimed at enterprises, right? Let's zero in.
So Rookout offers production-grade tools that allow engineers to dive into their code. Our key product is called Live Debugger. It allows engineers to set non-breaking breakpoints on any line of code they want within their application, and then see what happens when this line is executed on remote environments. It can be cloud, it can be serverless, Kubernetes, staging, production, whatever. You're going to get stack traces, variable values, anything you would expect from a local debugger, except you can do it in remote environments anywhere you want. Now, the tool is geared for engineers of all kinds, and in fact, we even have a community tier that's free for use, but we spent a lot of time and effort in making this production grade for enterprises and baking in the compliance, security, performance, availability, support considerations that enterprises need, because from our experience, their pain is much bigger. I mean, if you are a one-man show, you know the code, you have access to production, you can redeploy at will. I mean, it sucks to redeploy for a single log line, but you can do it if it's a one-man show. But if you're an enterprise with controls, with separation of concerns, separation of duties, with a lot of load that's coming into those environments, all of a sudden, redeploying for a single log line can be a matter of days, weeks, or even months. And so we find that those enterprises have much bigger pain, and we aim to provide a tool that can support everyone, from the smallest use cases to the most complex enterprise.
Excellent. Where can they get more information?
So you can reach out to me, Liran_last on Twitter, or you can reach out to our website, rookout.com. We also have a free sign-up page. You can start a trial, you can use for free, or you can reach out to us via mail or anywhere else.
Anyway, but it's rookout.com is the main site.
Rookout.com. Check us out.
Hey, Lior, thank you so much. A pleasure to see you again. Hopefully it won't be, excuse me, it won't be 3 years. We'll see you again soon.
See you soon.
All right. Rookout.com here on Techstrong TV. We are at Yalla DevOps. We still have a few hours left in the day. Maybe we'll have some more people stand by.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with a fantastic group of industry professionals to give you the latest and greatest news. And alongside our airing of the open mainframe and engineering the change, we had some great content today. We'll be back again on Tuesday, so we hope to see you then. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.